Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. If we could come to order for the regular meeting of the Planning Commission. Ms. Weiss, would you go over any requests for continuances, withdrawals, postponements, and any other announcements you may have?
Thank you, Chair Thompson. We have no changes for today's special meeting agenda. There's one item on the agenda. In terms of announcements, the last staff hearing officer meeting that we held just yesterday, I wanted to announce that there was, at least on one item, a member of the public questioning the staff interpretation of the zoning ordinance, and that was Mr. Tony Fisher. I didn't know if he would be here today. The staff hearing officer contacted the liaison and let you all know what the actions were. It's a project at 2105 Anacapa. So there were just some questions that hasn't been appealed. The hearing was just yesterday. 2 weeks ago, from that hearing, we did end up with 4 appeals. One was announced at your prior meeting regarding the property at 2140 Mission Ridge. Subsequent to that, we then received 3 appeals, all 3 filed by Mr. Kahan, and those are regarding the property at 1415 Mission Ridge Road, 618 San Pasqual, and 436 Corona Del Mar. So at this point, we are coordinating with the staff, the appellants, and the applicants on all 4 of these matters, and we'll keep you posted as to when the appeal hearings are scheduled before you. And that concludes my announcements. Last Tuesday, the City Council on the 24th heard the matter related to building heights, and I'm assuming that the Commission has been informed through the media or other venues, but just briefly, the Council on a 4-3 vote declined to move forward with the charter amendment with regard to building heights. So the status on that particular issue is the citizen initiative, Save El Pueblo Viejo, will be on the November ballot, November 09, regarding building heights, and there would be no other measure proposed by the city.
Okay. Do you want to go through our upcoming schedule, or is there anything that comes to mind?
Just briefly to mention that your next regularly scheduled meeting is April 2nd. That meeting will include a lunch, your standard lunch meeting. The staff has been asked to update the Commission on T-Fire activities, so staff will be at your lunch meeting to provide you additional information about that. And you will have a site visit regarding a project on Anacapa Street. And that's when the Planning Commission will be asked to also make its formal recommendations to the City Council regarding the inclusionary housing ordinance amendments. And it looks like we also have a status report regarding Highway 101 for that day.
Okay. Thank you. Now, at this point in the meeting, we open the floor for comments from the public on items that are not on the agenda. I have 2 speaker slips. First, Mr. Bob Hanson, second, Mr. James Kahan.
Hello. My girlfriend was looking at the internet, reading her email, and the state homeless groups are trying to get a housing first model, which we all know what housing first is. That's what they're really saying is helping the homeless to get off the streets, is get them into housing as soon as possible. And a friend of mine, James Magruder, always said we should sit there and have like different places in town to have homeless people. And we need to be prepared for the future. Right now we're in extreme, extraordinary times. We don't know what's really going to happen. Around the country there's tent cities. I'd much rather see buildings. Since, let's just say if we had 5 buildings around town and had nonprofits and churches and homeless themselves keeping these places open 24/7, we'd be doing a great thing for the homeless, because we would be providing housing first and getting them off the streets, no matter what their situation is. The other day, President Obama was at a press conference, and he was asked about the 10 cities. He mentioned children, families, he kind of paused, and homeless veterans. But we all know that there's a lot of other homeless out there, and that's what we need to be prepared for. And having extra beds at the Casa is great. We're going to talk about that today. But we need to sit there and as a nation do this. But California wants to sit there and pass a bill of housing first. And I think that's the answer. And I want to thank James Magruder for coming up with the idea of saying, let's spread them around town, like have one in Carpenter, one in Goleta, a couple in town here, down by the airport, and make some sense of all this, and have people park there even in their vehicles until this whole thing's over. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Mr. Kahan.
My name is James Kahan. We filed appeals. Friends of Outer State Street in our executive committee decided it was appropriate in light of the modifications that were granted. I came and appealed to you last week to review the modifications that were before you. One of them had 7 modifications. One was done to legalize an illegal use, and another one was problematic. I felt, and I believe very strongly, it should have been looked at. The board felt also it should have been looked at, and you will get a chance to review it. And I want to express my thanks to John, again, and also to Charmaine for voting on the Century 21 in the appropriate way. That one was not brought up. Century 21 is still going. It is the project on Outer State Street, where John gave an analysis of the noise element, compliance with it. Clearly didn't comply. There were other problems, and you did the right thing, and I don't think the City Council did the right thing, but we're going to let the Court of Appeal decide that one. Anyway, good luck today.
Thank you. Are there any other items that anyone in the audience wants to speak to that is not on today's agenda? Okay, I'll close that part of the hearing and bring us to the new item, the application of Casa Esperanza for a continuation, a change to the CUP. Kelly Brodesson going to give us the staff report.
Good afternoon, Kelly Brodesson, Assistant Planner, Community Development Department. The request before you today is an amendment to the existing conditional use permit for the Casa Esperanza Homeless Center. Currently, the center operates a year-round shelter of 100 beds. Between December 1st and March 31st of each year, the center operates an emergency homeless winter shelter with a monthly average of 200 beds. A summary of the project history is provided in the staff report. Update reports are provided to the Planning Commission every 2 years, and the last report was presented in November 2008. The next report will be is scheduled for March 2010. The amendment consists of 2 aspects: an increase in the capacity of the year-round shelter by 40 beds, 140 beds total, for a 90-day period from April 1st, 2009 through June 30th, 2009. This will also allow the police chief and Casa Esperanza some flexibility to allow temporary increases in the number of beds when warranted based on weather concerns and public safety concerns. If this determination for such an increase is found to be warranted, the number of beds could be increased by up to 10% for only 7 days. We also wanted to clarify an omission that was in the PC resolution number 05104 regarding the winter shelter operation dates, which are open from December 1st through March 31st. Right now, the emergency winter shelter is in operation with approximately 200 beds. This number is slated to go down to 100 starting in March 31st. However, with this amendment, the year-round capacity will be reduced to 140 beds instead of 100. The individuals who would be housed with this temporary increase include participants of Casa Esperanza's transitional housing program, including people in need of medical care, seniors over the age of 55, persons with mental illnesses, and persons with physical disabilities. Casa Esperanza is investigating the possibility of a permanent increase in the number of year-round beds, including the funding that will be required to do so. A permanent increase will have to return to Planning Commission. Staff recommends today that you approve the amendment to the conditional use permit, make the findings in the staff report, and subject to the conditions of approval in Exhibit A. We have received several letters in opposition and in support of this project, and they have been provided to the Commission. And let me know if you have any other questions.
Okay. Questions from the Commission? Well, I have a few questions. Why are we looking at a 3-month CUP? Normally, land use decisions and changes are made on a more long-term basis than 3 months.
Mm-hmm. The Chair Thompson, the request from Casa Esperanza came up fairly quickly. They made contacts with the city and were concerned about conditions on the streets and asked to look at making a temporary change while they investigate further. As Ms. Broadison mentioned, my understanding, and the applicant can speak to this further, they have an interest in expanding the capacity of the shelter longer term, which would clearly be a full standard amendment of the conditional use permit, but they're not prepared to do that right now. This request is more of a immediate request based on immediate conditions of the community, what we've been experiencing in terms of dangers and situations on the street. So, and because the shelter does have the capacity, there is already a condition that allows the shelter to be extended in certain circumstances of weather, but this request, when we first heard it at the staff level, we felt it was beyond our capacity to make an administrative determination. That was considered first because the nature of the request, as you say, is not quite as standard as truly amending the base conditional use permit. But we felt that that was not appropriate. And so when you look at the condition that the applicant is amending, it already has temporal standards to it, time of the year, number of people. And so we felt it was appropriate to look at further amending that condition. But I think the applicant can speak to how it came up and why for them to do it just temporarily this 1 year.
So basically what you're saying is a temporary deal to provide more time to do a more permanent analysis of the situation?
Yes, again, and I think the applicant could speak to that. I think it's not so much an analysis from their part, but more of a funding concern. And then the staff review of an amendment to the conditional use permit for an ongoing longer term and greater occupancy would be analyzed once they make that application.
Okay. For clarification, when I reviewed the changes that have occurred over the years, in the last 10 years since it was originally approved, correct me if I'm wrong, but the original year-round approval was for 30 beds, and we're now talking about 140 beds?
Do you want to answer that?
Yes, the original approval was for 30 beds with an emergency winter shelter for an average of 200 beds, not to exceed 230 beds.
Right, but now this request would bring us to 140 beds through June.
That's correct, but this project did get reviewed by the Planning Commission and was appealed by some neighbors. The City Council reviewed the appeal, and they required that the applicant form what's called, I think it's called the Milpas Action Task Force. They did a lot of neighborhood, they did a lot of interaction with the neighborhood, and they decided that the Casa Esperanza had responded to the neighborhood's concerns and felt that it was warranted to approve the increase at that time.
Right, I didn't go through all the intermediate steps, but as I mentioned, it's been changed several times over the years. Another question. In the staff report that we got here, either the staff report or in the applicant's request, it was mentioned about Salvation Army closing a facility in Carpinteria. Are we expected then to take people from Carpinteria and move them? Don't we have enough in Santa Barbara to deal with?
You want to answer that, Sue? I think it'd be appropriate to hear from Sue Gray. She's been working with the Council Task Force and regional efforts related to homelessness.
Thank you, Chair Thompson.
Thank you.
Council, committee members. My name's Sue Gray, and I'm the Community Development Program Supervisor in the Community Development Department. As far as the loss of beds in Carpinteria, that's an adult rehabilitation center run by the Salvation Army. And they have said in news reports that they plan on transferring whatever clients that are there existing currently to another facility, giving them the opportunity to go to, I believe it was either Bakersfield or Los Angeles. I think the bigger issue is the people who choose not to go, and also that's kind of a, I believe it's a 1 or 2 year program, but a lot of places in Santa Barbara refer people there. They're people who are from the streets, drug addicted, alcohol addicted, and without the alcohol recovery center, a lot of them would be homeless. So I think the issue is not really with the current clients that are there, but in the future, where would people go that need that kind of help?
Okay. The only reason that I asked the question, it was referred to in the staff report. A couple of clarification items. In the proposed finding number D, it talks about 330 beds total. Can you explain where 330 beds came from?
Chair Thompson, I believe that might have been a typo. 230. Apologize.
So it should be 230 in the findings? Okay. I would ask the applicant, perhaps you could explain the meals program at Casa Esperanza to us?
Should they do that as part of their presentation or just as an independent question? The applicant.
I thought we were doing planning commission questions at this point. If the applicant plans to cover that, then we'll defer it to that point.
They will.
Okay. Maybe I'll hold the rest of my questions until after that point. Mr. Jostis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If staff could help me understand, the application to amend the CUP for this interim period, that would make this period in an annual operating condition. Is that correct, or is this just a one-time single event from now until June situation?
The application is for this time period in the year 2009 only.
Okay. I was wondering what the environmental review or categorical exemption was for the approval done in 2003 when we increased from 30 to 100 beds. Was that covered in any kind of environmental document, categorical exemption or other?
We'll check the record on that.
Okay. My last question, I didn't see anything in the staff report that gave kind of the justification for using the categorical exemption that was listed. I understand the additions to existing facilities as pertaining to negligible expansion or minor additions, and I didn't see any rationale for why that particular exemption applied to this project.
Chair Thompson, I'm aware that it's fairly standard in your staff reports to provide some explanation when technical studies or a more extensive environmental review is done. That categorical exemption used for this project, pretty much on its face, its description, we felt met the circumstances of this project. So there is not much more to report than just that's the determination made by the environmental analyst for up to a 3-month period to have the increase in the number of people in an existing facility is considered by the environmental analyst to meet those standards for the categorical exemption.
Thank you, John. Commissioner Lodge.
Well, I was going to wait until after the public input, but I will ask one question. I've seen some references to the possibility that the facility in Carpinteria may remain open. Does anyone know for certain?
If you want to respond, let staff handle it, and then you could come up to this podium.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
while staff is conferring, one other point regarding Commissioner Joseph's questions. The proposal from Casa Esperanza is a one-time, one-year expansion of the emergency beds. The police department's request and recommendation would be an annual, ongoing portion of the conditional use permit. That is an element where if the police chief makes a factual determination that either weather conditions at any time of the year or that circumstances out on the streets present a public safety concern that the allowed use at that particular time, so whether it's in the summer or if it's in the during the emergency shelter period, that whatever number was generally applicable under the conditional use permit could be raised by up to 10% for a period of up to 7 days. So that would be an ongoing change to the conditional use permit, as opposed to the one-time request that Casa Esperanza has made.
Thank you. Mr. Vincent.
Chair Thompson, I'll answer the question regarding the Salvation Army closure. There was an article in the paper just the other day that said that the closing of their thrift store on Milpas Street was postponed, and it said that it was staying open indefinitely, but to be closed whenever, I guess, they decided to close it. There was no mention of the actual recovery center and what they plan to do with that. So that's unknown at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jacobs.
Thank you, Chair Thompson. I'll hold most of my questions till after the applicant and the public comment, because I am especially eager to hear what people who actually live in the neighborhood have to say. But I do have a question about RV parking. Is there any effect in here about how recreational vehicles will be parked?
That may also be an appropriate question for the applicant. There's limited parking that was approved with the shelter, and I understand that the allowance for the residents and clients of the shelter to use the off-street parking spaces is something that's managed by the shelter operations. But on-street RV parking is regulated citywide through different city ordinances, and so there are certain streets and areas that are posted for no parking overnight or have limited times where parking's allowed, and those restrictions do end up affecting overnight RV parking or large truck parking. But as far as if Commissioner Jacobs, your question's related to clients and residents of the shelter that have vehicles and RVs and where do they park, I think the applicant can address that. Again, my understanding is that some people do have vehicles and that there's an off-site parking location just down the street, as well as some parking spaces on site, and that those are used by the residents of the shelter, temporary.
But if they are parking an RV off the streets on the property, they're not sleeping in them. I guess that's
my understanding, yes.
And the applicant can clarify that too.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have a presentation from the applicant?
Just one follow-up question. We looked at the record regarding the prior decisions on the Planning Commission and the staff determination that when the occupancy was increased, a categorical exemption was again used at that time. The staff report and support materials for the expansion did include a greater discussion of a number of issues. The infill categorical exemption was used, in which case we discussed particular areas of concern, noise, wildlife, and the standards that are listed in that infill exemption. In this case, we use the one that is just a straight description of a change to an existing facility.
Okay, thank you. Does the applicant have a presentation?
Thank you, everyone, for meeting today. It's my understanding that you all had the day off, and that I thought maybe doesn't bode well. But we certainly appreciate you hearing us tonight and today. I speak from my mind and my heart pretty much off the cuff. But today I have significant information to read with you. I don't want to make any mistakes because your decision today quite literally could mean a life or death for some folks. And so I want to really thoroughly give you a picture of where we've been, part of the citywide 12 plan process, and how we've got to where we are today. So over the past few years, the homeless problem in Santa Barbara has changed, and Casa Esperanza Homeless Center has evolved in our ability to provide a better approach to saving and rebuilding the lives of our homeless neighbors. 3 years ago, Casa Esperanza succeeded in placing 119 homeless people in permanent housing. Last year, 295 people found housing thanks to Casa Esperanza. 3 years ago, 89 people found work thanks to job placement and job counseling at Casa Esperanza. Last year, 195 people found life-sustaining work based on our help. And this year, despite the economic downturn, our rate of success is higher than ever. Already 239 people have found housing, and 158 people have found jobs in the last 8 months. In February alone, we placed 42 people in safe and self-sufficient housing, which was a record number. Just for comparison, last month we visited a model homeless program in Los Angeles that serves 6,000 people and has job development office staff of 3 people. They boasted of finding jobs for 46 people in the same period that we placed 158 with 1 job developer. One of the most common misperceptions about Casa Esperanza is the idea that the homeless center is a flop house, a place where people find food and shelter, 3 hots and a cot. Every year, this perception becomes further and further from the truth. During the winter months, between December 1st and April 1st, Casa Esperanza serves the humanitarian purpose of keeping people warm and alive during the winter months. During this time, we serve as the designated South Coast Winter Shelter. Up to 200 people are permitted to live at the shelter on a first-come, first-served basis. Everyone gets a chance regardless of their problems or conditions. If they can meet very basic behavioral guidelines, they have a chance to find refuge in relative safety. On April 1st, however, things changed significantly. The shelter program beds dropped from a capacity of 200 beds to 100 beds. The first-come, first-served basis of the shelter services ends, replaced exclusively by a transition to housing and medical respite program. Some beds are reserved exclusively for people who have jobs, but have not saved enough money to secure housing. These Casa Esperanza members are guided by our job development expert. Some beds are reserved for senior citizens and disabled people who await Social Security benefits and are working towards securing permanent housing. These members are exclusively supervised by counselors working with seniors and the disabled. Some beds are reserved for sick people discharged from Cottage Hospital or straight from the streets, supervised through Casa Esperanza's doctor, we now have a doctor, and nursing staff. Some beds are also reserved for mental health department clients and for the important outreach work provided by Ken Williams. When Casa Esperanza does its job right, building trust, saving lives, and building lives, on April 1st, at least 100 homeless people are ready, willing, and able to fill those 100 transitional beds. Over the last few years, however, our success in meeting that goal has outstripped our capacity to provide for those who have experienced breakthroughs, fragile recovery, and jobs. Last year, we were forced to release people who had lived successfully in the shelter back onto the streets and back to homelessness because of the 100-bed CUP restriction. We were forced to choose who was most needy, tasked with determining who will lose their hard-fought recovery and who will go from safety into harm's way. Placing our vulnerable and homeless neighbors who are safe and working hard to rebuild their lives back into tents, parks, and bushes makes no sense from every possible level when there are empty beds available to keep them off the streets and working towards productivity. This year, the crisis facing the most vulnerable homeless people has grown. On April 1st, there are up to 140 people who desperately need shelter and who are help, who will be placed in harm's way if released onto the streets prematurely. On February 24th, the City Council passed a 12-point plan to address the problems of homelessness. This plan calls for the creation of a campaign that will simultaneously increase enforcement, curb problems with panhandling, develop new zoning regulations to better control alcohol sales, and to increase social service availability, helping the most vulnerable homeless find shelter and those who seek recovery to find the services they need as the enforcement measures mount. In Great Britain, the rate of homelessness, which they call rough sleeping, has dropped by 75% thanks to a plan very similar to the one unanimously passed by the Santa Barbara City Council. It can work, but only if the vast majority of Santa Barbaraans participate and support the effort. It has been proven that increased law enforcement, when it is simultaneously paired with enhanced shelter, housing, and addiction services, homelessness recedes. Casa Esperanza is a leader in supporting the goals of this 12-point plan, and we encourage the Planning Commission to take immediate action to support this plan as well. You have the opportunity to do that today. In regards to shelter care, the plan clearly states that there is a real need for increased bed capacity for homeless people. While honestly assessing the problems that have emerged in the Milpas area as a result of the shelter presence, the plan encourages Casa Esperanza to work with the city and our neighbors to create mitigations that would enable the shelter to help more people in need. We are working to follow that plan while also acknowledging that a real crisis exists for the people we serve on April 1st when they are unnecessarily pushed from shelter care back into the elements. At the same time, we point out again, as we did in our report to you just a few months ago, that the police reported to you a 20% reduction in homeless crime in our neighborhood following many years of increases, and the fact that law enforcement street sweeps of TV Hill, the railroad tracks, creeks, and other areas have had a significant impact on the area's homeless population as well. This helps to prove that this proves the need for a 12-point plan that is used citywide, not area by area, but citywide, to solve the problem. When the plan passed the City Council unanimously on April 24th, we began to study how we would proceed with this responsibility laid out for us in the 12-point plan. In a very short time, the facts of this crisis hit us square in the face, and it was obvious that immediate action was necessary. In the last 8 months, 2 homeless people have been killed in this region, and their assailants are still at large. Violence towards the homeless has increased. 11 homeless people have died in the last 2 months, compared with 18 in the entire year of 2008. In the near future, the Salvation Army has stated that it will close 86 recovery beds that are available now for addicts and alcoholics, and in the newspaper today, the Rescue Mission reported that as a result, they were full. As Sue stated, the impact from the loss of the Salvation Army is not the people who are in the program today. But the question is, when people seek recovery in the future, when they graduate from the detox program, where will they go? We can only conclude that many of those people are going to end up homeless. Today we have a list of 140 people who have lived safely at Casa Esperanza who are beginning their long struggle to recovery. 40 people stand today to go from safety into harm's way if we are forced to reduce bed capacity. They are seniors, the sick, and disabled, women, and people suffering from mental illness through no fault of their own. One of those people is a middle-aged man who has suffered from alcohol since childhood. Today, he is in recovery. New to sobriety, he is still struggling with the first steps of AA. He has started to look for a job, but has not found one yet. His sobriety is very fragile, and he will certainly relapse if forced back onto the streets. How is it that releasing this man back to the bushes along the East Beach Railroad tracks helps to solve the homeless problem in Lower Milpas? One woman is a trauma victim who suffers from depression and substance abuse. While living on the street, she was actively using and was physically attacked several times. She was finally arrested, and at the time of her release, she came to Casa Esperanza. Since staying at Casa, she's been sober, but suffers from severe depression to the point where she struggles to care for her basic needs. Because of her traumatic history and mental illness, she is painfully slow to trust anyone. Slowly, she's reemerging. How is it that we solve the homeless problem on West Beach by sending her back to live in Pershing Park? One 65-year-old man suffering from alcoholism messed up his Social Security and had his benefits suspended and lost his housing. He suffers from severe gastronomic disorder affecting his stomach and his intestines. He is eligible for long-term assisted living, but when his Social Security kicks back in, his income does not qualify him for the majority of skilled nursing facilities, as those beds are very, very short for people who are indigent. He is sober today, and thanks to our medical clinic, he's getting better. How do we help the homeless problem on State Street? By sending him back to Panhandle on State Street. One man, finally, is an Iraq War veteran. He suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder, a blood disorder, and substance abuse. He is now safely sheltered and has begun working with the Veterans Affairs to secure income and proper medical care. We can help save this man. What good does it do for our nation for this man to become another one of the legions of homeless veterans? So why not house these people instead of some other person? I've got 45 people today who have or are securing jobs living in the shelter right now. Perhaps it would serve our city to throw them back into homelessness. I have 140 stories that I could tell you. How much will it cost the taxpayers when these folks begin to recycle through the justice system, hospitals, and emergency centers when we could avoid that cost today? Let's be clear. Casa Esperanza is reducing the number of people currently served today. We would go from 200 down to 140. There are 50 to 60 people who are not ready to make a commitment to transition, and they will not be housed at Casa Esperanza. Do we want to help them? Yes. Is this the time, and is this the right nighttime program to help them? No. Do we need a program like that? Yes. Should it be at 816 Cacique Street for the next 8 months? No. Today we are asking you to permit Casa Esperanza to serve an additional 40 people at the Cacique Street shelter for a period of up to 90 days. 100% of the people served in this capacity will be just like the people I described above: seniors, the sick and disabled, women, and people suffering from mental illness through no fault of their own. We are not open on a first-come, first-served basis starting April 1st. Some of the letters you received rightly stated that I don't believe you can classify the homeless into an entire group. We agree. That is why our plan to address this problem and help these people is set up the way that we just told you. During this 90-day period, we will follow through in working with the city and neighborhood groups to develop every potential mitigating opportunity to help those most in need and capable of helping themselves, while at the same time doing whatever we can to reasonably do what we can to help improve the environment for and with our neighbors. At Casa Esperanza, we know and feel the difficulties faced by our local businesses and our residential neighbors. When they tell you that their business is affected by homelessness, we believe that. And we also know, because of our transitional program, we need their businesses to be successful so the people that we serve can get a job and do the work that they need. And we have members on our board who are members and tell us what's going on. And I go out on the streets and I see it myself. I know and feel that. And we can do something about that. Over the last few months, some have suggested that perhaps the problems encountered within the neighborhood are related to foot traffic during daytime hours, when people come to Casa Esperanza's community kitchen for lunch, many of whom do not physically live at Casa Esperanza. Some have suggested that an increase in bed capacity might be mitigated by limiting community kitchen food services and bringing fewer people into the neighborhood. We are ready to explore that idea and follow through on it, but based on facts. What is the level of police contact and calls for service for people who sleep at the shelter versus the contact rate for people who use our day services but do not sleep at the shelter? The Fielding Institute has agreed to create and complete just such a study. Depending on the results of the study, it is possible that we could actually find a way to feed more people experiencing hunger and decrease apparent problems in the beach areas in Lower Milpas. If that's possible, we will develop just such a plan and just such a program. Will we stop helping hungry people in the middle of the Second Great Depression? No. Are we willing to create a scattered site program that might relieve pressure in Lower Milpas and other programs as well, and other neighborhoods as well? Absolutely. Are we open to other ideas to meet our mutual goals? Absolutely. Some will criticize the expansion of Casa Esperanza based on the idea that more homeless people will come to Santa Barbara if our helping capacity expands, even by 40 beds. In this case, however, Casa Esperanza is not opening its doors to anyone and everyone during the 8 winter months. The likelihood that the sick, the physically disabled, senior citizens, and vulnerable women will flock to Santa Barbara for 40 beds is just not reasonable. Imagine a man wheeling his way from San Diego to Santa Barbara because he heard maybe there were 5 more beds for those folks. That's not going to happen. This argument suggests as well that Santa Barbara is a mecca for homeless people and that the homeless are on a pilgrimage to this great place. It's a great place. I doubt they're on a pilgrimage here. There are 2 articles, one posted in the New York Times this morning and one posted yesterday. One talks about the homeless problem in Fresno. The other talks about Governor Schwarzenegger's decision to approve a tent city in the California Fairgrounds in Sacramento. 90,000 homeless people live in L.A., and thousands more throughout the state. Is Fresno, dealing with 2,000 homeless people, Fresno, a mecca for the homeless? I don't think so. Sacramento? Since when is Sacramento a mecca for homeless people? Downtown L.A., is that a mecca? Do we really think that homeless people flock to those places because there's great shelter services? They don't. There's other reasons. Joblessness, untreated mental illness, addiction, that is homelessness. Over the last 12 months at Casa Esperanza, people who state that their last place of residence was right here in Santa Barbara County has increased by 20%. The number of people from outside the county has decreased by the same amount. The number of homeless seniors over 55 seeking shelter increased from 198 to 265. The rise in people seeking shelter with physical disabilities was equally as dramatic. Some will say that Casa Esperanza will just come back sometime in the future seeking even more beds to provide even more help at 816 Cacique Street. This is not the case for reasons both physical and therapeutic. Housing 200 people for 4 months based on a mission to save lives during winter is one thing. Expecting that people can succeed in such an atmosphere for 365 days every year when our mission is to rebuild lives, that's another thing. Filling this particular building will not only decrease the success rate of its residents, in all likelihood it is simply not financially sustainable. Filling this building to complete capacity year-round is not the best solution. The Santa Barbara County 10-year plan to end chronic homelessness, unanimously adopted by every jurisdiction in Santa Barbara County, provides a blueprint for a variety of solutions to meet the housing needs of our homeless neighbors. Casa Esperanza stands ready to activate some of those ideas. As I've shared with you before, in the argument about homelessness in general, we have on one side of our argument, all you need is love, and on the other side, pull them all up by their bootstraps and kick them out of town if they don't succeed. We believe that this proposal, this 90-day attempt to quite literally save lives that can be saved, when taken in the context of the 12-point plan, is a reasonable proposal right here in the middle of that argument. It helps people who are willing to pull themselves up by their bootstraps with the love and care that they need to succeed. It gives us the time we need to deal with a crisis and the time we need to engage fully to see if we can help more people over the long haul while trying to mitigate potential consequences and at the same time trying to find a way to pay for it. If the community can't pay for it, we can't do it. You have been following our progress every 2 years and sometimes every year. Last year, 5 months ago, I stood before you and gave a report. It was me and my board chair in an empty room. The Commission has followed the depth of this effort every year and every 2 years. Casa Esperanza has earned your trust, investment, and ongoing support. Our most vulnerable and hardworking homeless neighbors need that support now more than ever. Again, I appreciate you listening to this plea.
Thank you, Mr. Foley. Would you just stay up there a minute, as long as you're there? Let's keep the comments from the audience down, or we'll have to ask you to leave. Is anybody from the one more, and I'll ask you to leave, sir. Does anybody on the commission have any questions for Mr. Foley while he's up here? Commissioner Lodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The feeding program serves people who are not residents.
It serves any person who's experiencing homelessness, yes.
And that is a year-round program?
365 days a year, yes.
And approximately how many people, aside from those who are residents?
200. 200 a day in total. We would anticipate that 50 to 60 a day are people who are living in residence.
Okay. And let's see, I have some questions about the letter you submitted. The on your letter, toward the bottom, the first page, currently Casa Esperanza has a list of 136 people that require shelter beyond April 1st. These include 70 who participate in Casa's transitional housing program. So these are people that would be there anyway. So
We have 100 people who qualify for our existing program. We have 36 to 40 people who live successfully at Casa Esperanza, who are qualified for a transitional living program, but we have to decide who stays and who goes.
Okay. Now, you go down to 100 beds under the conditional
Right.
present status. Okay, so then there are 36 people that you need to provide for.
Yeah, as of today, there's 36 to 40.
Okay. And then okay, so you are looking for other locations and as well to increase the program, or
The 10-year plan to end chronic homelessness is under the fiscal umbrella of Casa Esperanza, and it's a 30 board members are separate countywide. There is a countywide effort to find ways to use the Housing First model to help people go from chronic homelessness into housing. That's definitely a part of what we're doing, and we support all of the efforts to create other types of housing.
okay. And there's been reference to people being referred to the Salvation Army facility that is going to be closed in Carpinteria. I assume they're closing it because of fiscal issues?
Well, I can't speak for the Salvation Army. The news reports say that they are in debt $10 million and that they need to sell the building.
Okay. I was going to suggest maybe it would be worth it to the city to help keep it open. But
Many of us have thought the exact same thing. And again, one of the reasons that we felt it was important to ask for 90 days is because we don't, they just said they're going to keep the thrift store open. And they said they were going to close the thrift store. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. The life on the streets and life for people in recovery is in flux right now. And the nonprofit community is in high level of flux right now. We think it's important to keep people as safe as we possibly can, folks who are capable of being successful, which is why we asked for 90 days. At the end of 90 days, we may or may not have this study done. I'm not sure what the Fielding Institute and the police are going to do with us to see what we can do to make that happen. But we will have a much better understanding of how things are playing out as we enter the spring and summer months. Things change between winter and summer, but right now, as I told you about the level of deaths, the 2 murders, I mean, it's a very scary environment for people. And the idea that we might put somebody who's vulnerable out on the street today, on the 1st, and know that they could be hurt when they could be safe, that's a hard thing to do.
okay, and then this provision with 48 notice, the police chief makes the finding that it's necessary. My thought was, if it's a weather issue or something like that, 48 hours is a little too long.
Well, let me tell you, we currently have something about weather in our permit that we've used, and we continue to use that. We received this information that the city attorney had wanted to place this into your staff report, and our statement is that we're always willing to work with the police. We're always willing to do what we can to help them, and if we can work out a way for them to pay us to do that, and we can work out the protocols to do that, we're willing to work with them on that.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Jacobs?
Thank you. Mr. Foley, it sounds like when I hear your speech and your passion for saving people, a couple times I heard a real pinch point at the we must decide who can stay or who can go. And I imagine that is a very difficult decision, and that any limit of any kind is going to create that kind of decision. Well, I have a twofold question. The first is, in the narrowest context, what sort of rules and decisions are made in your detox program? I see in the documents we have that 14 days is the longest that anyone can stay in the program, and that there are 12 detox beds. And so, first question is, how are those detox clients separated from the other clients? How are those decisions made? Can they recycle back for another stay of 14 days? Is there a time at which they must be out of the program? And then my second part of my question is same basic question, but for the population at large, amongst your clients, how do you decide who stays and who goes? Is
During
it just
this
you?
time-
Is it a committee?
Yeah, during this time, how do we decide is your question when we're going through this transition?
I'm presuming it's not you don't just wing it, right? Is there a policy? Is there a?
I just wanted to be clear that you're not talking about at other times of the year. You're talking about April 1st and how do we make that decision for the
Oh, no,
transition?
I'm actually talking about the year-round. I mean, let's say you didn't have extra beds. How do you decide who can stay or who can go? Because it is always going to be a decision point. There's
Right.
always going to be more people, I presume, that would like to stay than there are actually beds for. How do you decide? And certainly in the case of the 12 detox beds, I imagine that those 12 beds, I hope I got the number right because I got it out of our document.
I want to start with detox because that's an easy one. The front of our building has 12 beds in it, and that's actually Project Recovery run by the Council on Alcoholism and Drug Abuse. It's a part of our conditional use permit, but it's a separate program from Casa Esperanza. And they take people who are stating that they want to be in recovery, and they put them into the detox program. They get referrals from everywhere, and homeless people can participate. The weakness is, and which has been discussed in the city plan, is there's a grand total of 12 detox beds in the entire South Coast. And homeless people that we encounter with street outreach can take 9 to 12 days before they're able to get in. So that's one issue and that's one problem. We have no control over the detox center. But what we do know is that our goal always is that if somebody's homeless and goes to detox, we're finding a way to help get them into sober living or get them into residential treatment centers. What happens when the Salvation Army goes away? We don't have a plan for that. That came as a complete surprise, and we need to put our heads together on that. The transitional living program, as I had described, there are service providers that are both on our staff and are from the county and from other nonprofit agencies. And people who are capable of participating in those programs and being successful in them, that team makes decisions as to how those people are brought into the program. Any person who's qualified, for instance, for job development, they can come in, they're capable of getting a job. We might do some assessments for mental health. We might do, various assessments to get them the services that they need, but they'll be attached to our job developer. Someone who is a senior who's awaiting benefits from Social Security, they'll be attached to Ken Williams. So we have service providers who are attached to all of those people, substance abuse counselor, all of those folks. So that's how we make those decisions, and at this time, it's very tough. If we had nothing but a transitional living program, it would be fairly easy. But during the year, during the winter time, when we're getting people healthy and we're getting them better, and then we have an overflow of people who are qualified for the program, that started for us about 3 years ago. We didn't have that before, but we've really been working hard, as we've promised the community, to really help people get into recovery and get into housing. And we've become a social service agency and not just a place where people come and spend their time. We have a long way to go, but that's what we've tried to accomplish.
So some of that increase would be due to your efforts on the street to get people off the street and into this program.
That's right. That's right. We also have a street outreach team that goes out and tries to convince people to get themselves to the point of being ready to do some level of recovery, and we bring them into the shelter.
So you find there's lots of people out there that need your services.
That's correct.
I still don't feel I've got my answer, though. I'm wondering how you decide when people have to leave. Can they stay indefinitely?
Yes.
They can just stay as long as they want.
If
There's
they're
no cutoff.
if they're following the rules and they're able to participate, and just behaving themselves appropriately, they can stay until they're ready to go.
Any idea
We have some that have stayed for 5 days, 10 days. We've had one lady stay for 2 years. Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks for sticking with that. I appreciate that.
Mr. Foley, in your comments, which, by the way, since you had a written statement, would you provide a copy to staff for the record, and Commissioner Jacobs would like to have a copy?
Sure.
You mentioned studying the issue of attraction of problem folks into the neighborhood that might be coming to avail themselves of your services. When would that study be happening? Do you have a time period that you're looking at?
2 days ago, we got a commitment from the Fielding Institute to do it, and we contacted Chief Mannix, and we're just going to work to schedule a date and get started. I don't know.
It's getting started now. You haven't got a time period yet, but you are getting started.
We've got the 2 commitments. You know, it's very tricky. We need to protect the confidentiality of all the people that we have, and at the same time, we need to compare it to a police list. We're going to need to work out some protocols for how that's going to work and make sure that we're protecting everyone who needs to be protected, and then we'll take those results and we'll see what they tell us.
Okay. Commissioner Joseph?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Foley, in response to Ms. Jacobs' questions about how you make the decision, I understand that your primary criteria is first come, first serve. Are there other criteria you apply when you have to make that tough decision of who goes, who stays?
For the winter shelter, people can come on a first come, first serve basis. On April 1st, there is no more first come, first serve. You have to be connected to a service provider, and you have to have the ability to work with that service provider to be successful. So those service providers have criteria for who fits into those programs and who doesn't.
So that decision is made for you by the service providers who take care of the folks.
It's a team. It's a team.
Thank you.
And if I could just elaborate for one quick second. The winter shelter, if as an example, if let's say somebody comes and they are drunk and they're homeless and we've got a bed available to them and it's a cold night, we take them. And they can stay. If they sign in every day, they can stay as long as they behave themselves. On April 1st, on April 2nd, if that person shows up at the shelter and they say, you know, I don't really have any interest in getting any benefits, I'm pretty content, you know, with my alcoholism and being out on the streets, I just want a place to live, the answer is no. Right.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Foley. Does staff have anything else before we open for public hearing? Okay, we have a whole lot of requests to speak, so I'm going to ask everybody to be focused on what they say. Keep your remarks to 2 minutes. First speaker is Maureen Earls, followed by Chris Kamen.
Oh, okay. What happened to mine?
Good afternoon. I'm Maureen Earls, and I'm representing CLU, Clergy, and Laity United for Economic Justice. There are approximately 10 of us here, but I'm the only one that's going to speak, so we're trying to help with the time element. I want to express CLU's full support of this proposed amendment. We've attended the subcommittee meetings on the homeless people in Santa Barbara that have been occurring over the last few months, and we've listened to all the various concerns. 2 spokespersons came to a CLU meeting of 25 church representatives to inform us of the issues involved with homelessness in Santa Barbara. CLU representatives wrote to the members of City Council, and we spoke at the City Council meetings where the recommendations of the subcommittee were presented. We come to you as informed citizens and also members of the faith community. Our faith communities have for years been partners with the city in working with our homeless people. We serve the noon meals at Casa Esperanza. We help fund the community kitchen. We prepare and serve meals at Transition House, and we donate funds for the ongoing operation of Casa Esperanza. We also serve on the board of the 10-year plan, Bringing Our Community Home. I'm the faith representative on that board. We not only speak for the needs of the homeless people in our community, we help care and pay for their needs, and we work to eliminate homelessness through permanent supportive housing. Our conclusion from all this input, from both the meetings that we've attended and our experience is that there is sufficient reason to keep open the 40 additional beds at Casa Esperanza. We know there are chronic homeless people that will be put out on the street April 1st while these beds remain empty. The Milpas community has raised important questions. We believe they should be addressed. For example, adequate enforcement and outreach services have not met their needs as the population of homeless persons has increased. This increase, we understand, comes from various sources. We need to determine whether it is Casa Esperanza residents who are the cause of the increased problems or others. Therefore, we strongly support Mike Foley's proposal to study this situation. Decisions need to be made on facts, not assumptions. And there are solutions to these problems if people are migrating to Casa Esperanza area. We can, for example, have non-resident noon meal programs in other areas which would disperse that population on a daily basis. What we believe we can't do is put these chronically ill people on the streets while beds and services are available. Our commitment is to strongly urge the City of Santa Barbara to use our resources to ensure that lives of dignity and respect are accorded to all. And finally, we urge you not to be distracted by the genuine problems homeless populations may bring to this community, but to focus on how to find solutions to these problems while clearly keeping your eye on the central issue, the humane and decent treatment of our most vulnerable community members. Working together, we can create a positive solution for all the people whose lives will be impacted by the proposed amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Kamen, I hope I pronounced your name properly, followed by Lori Gaddis.
Well, thank you for letting me speak. I have a brief statement I'd like to read. I suppose if I was making money working in the homeless industry, like Mr. Foley here, I'd probably see things through his filter, but I don't. I just represent a resident who lives in this town, and I've talked to a lot of people. I've talked to a lot of homeless folks, and there's another side, another view of the situation you might expect. I'd like to read a brief statement from my perspective how it might be. Santa Barbara is being held hostage by the homeless enabling industry and their ally, the ACLU. The individuals working in the homeless enabling industry in our town have a built-in conflict of interest. On one hand, they're supposed to reduce the problem of homeless individuals and vagrants in our town. But if they do so, they work themselves out of a job. Since it's not human nature to work oneself out of a job that supports your family and provides hope for retirement one day, the individuals in this industry find themselves at cross purposes with the needs of the residents in our city. The residents want fewer drifters and vagrants to seek out our town as a cush place to hang out. But the individuals in the homeless enabling industry need the problem to continue or even expand in order to secure their own future paychecks. This is a basic underlying reason why, if we don't change our stance on these issues, the problems we are experiencing will only get worse. The ACLU is all too eager to bully and sue to support the homeless enabling industry in our town, and in doing so, it is hoping to achieve the goals of both parties, which is to institutionalize homelessness and vagrancy, and in doing so, to institutionalize their own jobs. The adage, if you build it, they will come, applies to this issue as well. We all heard how the city was flooded with calls from vagrants all over the country when a news station recently filmed a report on our lax policies allowing camping and cars overnight. Calls came in from all over the country as people inquired if they could come here to stay now. If you build it, they will come. This highlights the ongoing danger of expanding beds and facilities like Casa Esperanza and others, or doing anything else that may in any way signal to the waiting throngs of career homeless and vagrants that Santa Barbara should be their destination of choice. If you build it, they will come. Please do not continue to build a city that becomes a magnet for other cities' homeless and vagrants. Protect us, protect our town. I would like to propose that no further increases in any homeless enabling programs be considered until the following conditions have been met. 1, the city is operating under a balanced budget. 2, all individuals in the homeless enabling industry have a compensation evaluation structure that is based strictly on how effective they've been each year in reducing the number of homeless and vagrants that flock to Santa Barbara. And 3, that the city wins the ACLU lawsuit, which will provide a legal line in the sand that will stop the bullying and expansion of this problem by the ACLU and the homeless enabling industry. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Lori Gaddis. followed by Mark Romasauda.
I'm Laura Gaddis, and I'm a resident of Casa Esperanza, and I support the expansion for the 40 beds, partly because I am one of the vulnerable population who could land in the streets, and partly for others of that population. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Ramasauda, followed by Barbara Fitzgerald.
Hello, my name is Mark Romasanta. My family owns a Harborview Inn Hotel, Eladio's restaurant on the corner of State and Cabrillo. I manage the property for my family. I sent a letter to you. I hope you had time to read it. I'm not going to go over what's in the letter. First of all, I think Mike's done a lot of great work, and I think Casa Esperanza has done a lot of great work. My problem with this proposal is a few issues. One, I believe that a 3-month period is not reasonable. They will be back. I believe it should be addressed fully before the CUP is changed. There's a lot of good organizations out there, everything from Newhouse to Casa Serena to CALM. They all have rights to ask for changes in their CUPs or the way they operate. But I think it should be done in a complete and proper manner. Mike's talked about a lot of studies they are doing or going to do. I think they should be done. I don't think 90 days is going to make a difference. I think in 90 days there's going to be 40 people that could be put out, that could be vulnerable, that could be killed, just as April 1st would be. I think by putting pressure on getting the studies done, getting the information done, would save more lives, not less lives. I think this should be addressed completely and not partially. Again, I think they've done some great work, but I do not believe this is the time to extend the situation for a 90-day period. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Barbara Fitzgerald, followed by Nancy McCready.
Council. I have a letter here that I would like to read, which was in August of 1999 sent to the Planning Commission when they first wanted to have Casa Esperanza here, if that's agreeable. It went to the Planning Commission. We've been property owners since in the city of Santa Barbara for over 30 years. We're at a loss to understand how the City Council can ramrod a grant with unbelievable speed the funding of over $1 million and already have a meeting set for September 16th with the Planning Commission to review the proposed homeless shelter on the Cacique Street across from the new building on Milpa Street. We are now nearing construction. It took us nearly 2 years to get plans, permits, and go through all the channels with the city fathers. Architectural review, coastal commission, environmental sound testing, traffic, archaeology, you name it. This is what we take pride in our community. We've invested in this. We're very pleased that we had people who want to be here. We can't begin to tell you the problems that we have had. And this was in 1999 when they first came in here. I mean, you name it. We do hope it won't lead to legal action. The city police department are very aware of the problem. If we put security guards in there, they don't know how they can handle this because the police can't handle it. But this letter goes on and on. You did get a letter from me the other day, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So you are aware of the problems we are still having 10 years later? Can I read my letter so the people can hear what our response is as a property owner here, right across the street from them?
Read it if you can read it in 30 seconds.
Okay.
You've got 30 seconds left.
As a property owner, 201, 209 South Milpa, Santa Barbara, we're at a loss to understand the Planning Commission even thinking of approving an application of Mike Foley. First of all, we understand that they only have a conditional use permit for this area. We have invested a great deal of money developing our property, for which we were given an annual award in the year 2000 in recognition of outstanding contribution to the further enhancement of Santa Barbara's beauty for the mixed-use building we have. But ever since the Casa Esperanza was allowed the use of this property on Cacique Street, our property has been invaded day and night by the homeless. Number one, they invade the privacy of our upstairs 3 apartments at night by sleeping on the tenants' lounge chairs after the tenants have retired for the night. Can you imagine how hard it is for a woman to go outside her door to go to work and have a homeless laying there in her front door?
Okay,
They go
could you
down the stairs from there.
Could you
and
start
then it's-
wrapping up now, please?
Pardon me?
Could you start wrapping up your comments,
Yes.
please?
Anyway, they sleep at the back of our building. We're tired of the defecation and elimination of bowels. They drink, they're alcoholic, you name it. What can we do about this? All we do is ask the Planning Commission to consider what we are tenants and our property owners in the area have led to put up with. If this also Cacique Street is being extended under the freeway now, we understand now you're going to have a park out there. Can you imagine what those people that live there with residents are going to have to put up with?
Okay.
If it continues, no doubt it'll be a greater loss of property assess values for the community, and you're going to have to be lowering the property taxes.
Okay, thank you very much. Nancy McCready, followed by Barbara Ballin.
Hi, everybody. I don't feel so good today, so I'm just going to be... In February 6th of 1982, I was called to a meeting, and this was down at Santa Barbara parking lot. I didn't think there was going to be anybody there because it was pouring rain. And I went down there, and there were 30 men standing around in the pouring down rain having a meeting. And I went out there, and I could not believe it. They were decided to organize. And that group of homeless people organized to the point where the Interfaith Council came on board, and the men stood back and said, we need to shelter the women and children. And then when Transition House became, we got a new rescue mission. Then we became Casa Esperanza. Casa Esperanza came aboard. Through many of the years, we've gotten improvements, and we've learned about the homeless issue, and we have created programs that adjust to the population that we have. And my feeling is that the homeless themselves really need to be involved in their own recovery. And I was very proud of the fact that we have this meeting every Thursday at Casa Esperanza where the homeless themselves can talk about their addictions and their progress and the Casa Esperanza itself. And one of the people there suggested that a petition be made up for you guys. And so I typed up a petition. It says, we, the undersigned people who live on the streets of Santa Barbara, do respectfully plead with the Planning Commission to allow the addition of 40 beds at Casa Esperanza to house the most vulnerable of our population after March 31st, 2009. We know how bad it is to live on the streets of America. We also know that to force our disabled to leave the sanctity of our shelters when there are empty beds is an illogical and very cruel step to take. I went from Isla Vista to Santa Barbara and took on single people who live on the streets, and I got signatures. I have more, but they didn't show up here. So I just wanted to present these to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Give that to the staff. Barbara Ballin, followed by Anne Marie Cameron.
Mr. Thompson and members of the Commission, my name is Barbara Allen. The B is the middle initial. And I'm speaking today for the Board of Casa Esperanza, of which I am president. At our board meeting yesterday, we voted to ratify the Executive Board's recommendation that we support the 40-bed request as outlined by Mike Foley. More of our board would be present today, but they are at the Santa Barbara Foundation's Man and Woman of the Year luncheon, at which Dave Perry, one of our board members, is being honored this year. I want to assure you that our board takes this request very, very seriously. John Dixon of Tri-County Produce sits on our board. We feel his frustrations. We feel his concerns deeply. The CASA board and staff are committed to work with the city, with the police department, and with the Milpas merchants. In February, we transitioned more than 40 residents from Casa Esperanza into permanent housing. 40 people who lived at Casa in February are now residents of permanent housing. We need the 90 days that we are requesting to work toward housing these 40 of our most vulnerable homeless residents. I urge your passage of our request. I have grave concern for these 40 residents if they are on the street next Wednesday morning. Personally, I want to offer my sincere thanks for your consideration, and I invite each and every one of you to come for a tour of CASA. Thank you.
Thank you. Anne Marie Cameron, followed by David Burkholder.
Good afternoon, Chair Thompson. My name is Anne Marie Cameron, and I am the Executive Director of the Mental Health Association here in town. Clearly, I support this request, and I can assure you that there are countless reasons and facts to tell you about the homeless in our community that live with mental illness and the reasons that this proposal will help them. But I came to you today. I actually wasn't going to speak. I was going to submit a letter. But last night, my 13-year-old daughter, who's in 8th grade, had a homework assignment to write a literary response to a recent article in the Washington Post, and it was about a family who a year ago had a substantial income, but they're now homeless. And they live in Fairfax, Virginia, where their county pays for a hotel room until they can get into one of the shelter beds. And the article goes on to talk about what their life is like living in this tough economic times. She had to read the article and then talk about homelessness, and I told her that I was coming to this hearing today. I told her that what this proposal was about, and that from what I understand, it doesn't have a strong chance of being upheld. I think it's a thing that we need to really implore our city's leaders to take seriously. And she began to cry. And she said, I thought we lived in a great place. And I said, we do live in a great place. There's a lot of great agencies. We have a wonderful, wonderful nonprofit community, faith community, and leaders. I guess my point of view today is to ask you to think about it. We have a lot of technical reasons, CUPs, all of these things we can look at the lens. I'd ask you to look at the lens of a bright young 13-year-old's question of why wouldn't we do this? Why wouldn't we allow 40 people who are currently on the road to better life, recovery, housing, and employment continue on that path? And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. David Burkholder, followed by Alan Ramirez.
Hi there. My name's Dave Burkholder. I'm a resident, homeowner, business owner in Santa Barbara. I've been here about 6 years. I'm not exactly sure whether the answer to the homeless problems are more beds. It very may be. However, what I'm come to talk about is not necessarily what that's going to do, but what's not being done already. I have 3 children. I can't take them to Pershing Park. Can't throw the ball around with my son. It's not a good feeling when your kids ask you to go to the park and you say, you know what, we can't go to that park. I live 2 blocks from there, West Beach. My home cost over $1 million, and I live in fear of homeless transient people who continuously trash my business, my yard, dig through my trash cans. They cause a lot of problems. And I'm not talking about the people who are looking for help at Casa Esperanza. I'm talking about the majority of the homeless issue in Santa Barbara, which is the people who are on State Street. They are at the beach. They are at all of our parks. They're at our banks. They're at our car washes. They're everywhere we go. I don't know how long I can live here like this. So I'm asking for you guys to do something, whether it's on this topic, but on the general topic, is put some money. I mean, we're talking about $35 million in this packet that we give towards homeless people. What are we doing for the residents? What are we doing for the children? What are we doing for the business owners in this town? Thank you.
Okay, let's hold it down, please. Folks, I'm going to ask you again, please, no yelling or applauding. Just listen. Alan Ramirez, followed by Kath Webb.
Panel, I'm Alan Ramirez, and my wife and I own the property next to Casa Esperanza. So I'm speaking with a little bit of insight here when I address what I've seen over the tenure of Casa Esperanza. I saw the video, and very admirable, very admirable. I mean, those are very, very nice things. As intelligent people, I tell you to come over to my office in the morning when Casa Esperanza opens the door and they leave. I'll bring coffee and donuts. I want you to make an intelligent decision based on what you see. I'm not going to sit here with a lot of rhetoric and tell you bad, bad, bad. Come in the morning, no dress rehearsal from Casa Esperanza. You contact me or my staff, and you look at the video. You see you enjoy the parade. See what transpired with no security. Now, technically, you ask Casa Esperanza, do they have security? The answer will be yes. Let your own insight, let your own, what you see, what you witness, you tell me where the security is. This is not just a one occurrence thing. This goes on time and time again. By the way, when you're there, I'll also show you from my video camera what's transpired this week in our parking lot. Now, if you on that part of town, the infrastructure that's gone on over there is phenomenal. The fire department, the mail company, our building, Casa Esperanza is beautiful. When you're there, look at my sidewalk. It's about 3.5 years old. Tell me if you'd be thrilled about having the sidewalk look the way it looks. You talk to security, it's a free sidewalk. It wasn't free to me. I paid to have it put in. Ask yourselves, would you be happy with it? Please come to my office. You make up your own mind. Thank you, folks.
Thank you, Mr. Ramirez. Kath Webb, followed by Alicia Cabrera.
Hello, I'm Kath Webb, and I'm a local resident and homeowner in Santa Barbara. For the last 10 years, I've been a sort of a student of homeless issues. I've been hosting a group of homeless activists and service providers on our property every other week. And I've listened and I've seen lots of amazing people who do not make a lot of money doing this work. I've got to say many of them are volunteers. And I'll be very quick, I just want to lend my support to Mike Foley's proposal. I have found he and Casa Esperanza to be exceptional in terms of the way they work with this group. Whilst I've been supportive emotionally and in spirit in this last 10 years, for these issues, I've decided that today I'm going to actually put my money where my mouth is and give a donation to Casa Esperanza because I believe so much in the work that they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Alicia Cabrera, followed by Nadine McFarland.
Yes, hello, I'm Alicia Valenzuela. I'm a volunteer off and on for about, I can't even remember when I started at the Catholic Charities, and I love the work there. I'm self-employed thanks to 3 years ago through Eileen Gutierrez, that was job director there, and I'm proud to say I am proud to be a volunteer at Casa Esperanza. I have spent time numerous times. People come accuse me, even the staff members. You know what I do? I turn around and say, God bless them, God, for saying bad things about me. But I am proud to represent the Latino community and Santa Barbara. I'm from Mexico, but I've been raised in Santa Barbara. I have a lot of intelligence and respect for every human being. And I am very proud to be working as a volunteer at Casa Esperanza. I'll do it as long as God lets me be here in Santa Barbara. Thank you.
Thank you. Nadine McFarland, followed by Bonnie Donovan.
I think that my name is Nadine McFarland, and I used to stay at Casa Esperanza, and I think he was talking about me for the 2 years I was there. But I now try to help out over there, with the homeless people, to give back what they gave to me, because now I have my own place for a year now, and they helped me get into that place. Everybody there is there to help, and all you have to do is ask for it, and you have it. Thank you.
Thank you. And congratulations. Bonnie Donovan, followed, I've got 2 for Bonnie Donovan.
You should have 3, because I have 2 letters that I was asked to read.
Oh, I see. You're going to read 2 letters from other people.
Okay, and it's going long, so I'm not going to read the whole thing. One is from John Dixon, who is on the board of Casa Esperanza, who totally opposes this. He's also a business owner, and he tells you in this letter of all the things that's had to go on, that's going on, and continues to go on. and it's not improving. And another one is from Mary Ellen Tiffany, and she's a resident over on Arilla, which is right behind Tri-County Produce over on East Beach side. She's asking about, what about her property values? Is anybody considering that? Is anybody considering her safety? I have learned that the city of Santa Barbara spent over $35 million last year providing support to the homeless. The public record, however, that the number of police calls around Casa Esperanza and Malpas area have increased as the bed increases. She also brings up 1999 when they were doing everything and everybody was going to be taken care of. I was sent this over the email from Sue Gray from the city. This is all your shelters and services in Santa Barbara and the different times that they go, and it's over $35 million. So I don't know why Mr. Foley would ask us to pay for any more, like more police for security or anything over there. And I've talked politically correct, like all of you guys ask us to do, and I ask that the ladies and all the ladies here, please forgive me but how I'm going to talk. But I have a 3.5-year-old granddaughter, and we've had property for 32 years in West Beach, and we've done nothing but have to pick up the trash they throw all over the place, run from the dogs and the homeless chasing us, hose them down when they're out having sex on our properties. And this part I ask you to excuse me, okay? But it's the only way you guys are going to start understanding what we're talking about. We've talked the politically correct all along. My 3.5-year-old granddaughter's been exposed to penises, to men's pants pulled down as they are pooing on our buildings, not on the property, but against our buildings. Our neighbors don't get deliveries, and this neighbor is over there right next to Casa Esperanza because the men have their pants pulled down and they're going at it. And if you need any more description, I'll let you know what it is.
Maybe we could...
No, but I mean, I had this discussion with our priest at our church for all the faith-based, and I'm very religious. And you guys need to start looking at everything that's all around town for the homeless.
Right,
okay?
We're focused on the Casa Esperanza.
We can't increase it anymore. And the Armory was always opened any time back when you were mayor, whenever there's an emergency situation. And Mr. Foley kept spreading around that have Bonnie call, because we started a group, the East and West Beach side.
Okay, could you start wrapping it up, please?
Right. Just don't approve this, you guys.
Thank you.
Chair,
Commissioner Jacob.
the document from Sue Gray, do we have a copy of that? Is it the city's programs or is it the county?
Chair Thompson, Councilmember Jacobs. I did send a document out. It's on actually the city's website under the subcommittee on homelessness, the council subcommittee. So I can supply the Planning Commission with that document. But I would like to clarify that the $35 million is not money that's spent. It's city support money, but it's not spent every year. It's a cumulative total from, I believe, 1995. And it's capital as well as operating funds. So I would be happy to provide the Planning Commission with a copy.
Thank you.
I would like a copy of it.
Peter Newhouse, followed by Nancy Alexander.
My name is Peter Newhouse. I am convinced that Casa Esperanza is doing a great job. My problem with this whole homeless issue is that everybody is being lumped into one name, one category called homeless. If a person has lived in Santa Barbara and for some reason lost their home, became disabled, whatever, I'm perfectly willing to support them and get them back on the track. But what I'm seeing is a lot of people who are being classified as homeless come into the community to take advantage of some of our services. Now, the word has got to get around that we have free food, we've had free housing, people wash your feet. I mean, it's... I don't get free housing. I don't get my feet washed. But I'm just saying...
Okay, let's hold it down, please.
So let's just break it out into people who we're going to support who have been Santa Barbara residents versus the other people, which I'll just call transients for a better word. But these people are getting free food, they're getting free housing, they're getting coupons to stay in hotels, they get to sleep in the park. I go to City College to take some classes. Every morning there's homeless people in Pershing Park. I take classes at night. When I come back, I have to go through the park. Not a very comfortable thing to do. I feel that if we're going to have more beds, we're going to have more people. We started with 30 beds. It's gone up from then. And when will it stop? It's just there doesn't seem to be a limit to it. But I don't personally feel that it's the responsibility of Santa Barbara citizens to house and feed anyone who wants to come in and hang around Santa Barbara. Again, I remind you that I'm not talking about residents who have fallen on hard times. I support that. Now, one of the people on the board, John Dixon, who is a business owner, Tri-County Produce, he's playing a dual role here, but he is opposing this expansion. So I would just like to end that by saying, please don't expand this beyond its current bed count. Thanks.
Thank you. Nancy Alexander, followed by Ron Fox.
My name is Nancy Alexander. I've long been interested in homeless issues in the community, working over the years to provide programs for children of homeless families, to work on medical issues, dental issues of the larger homeless community. I've done all those things as a volunteer, as do many people in this community. I've also witnessed that many of the people who are employed by social service agencies do not make extremely generous salaries doing the work that they do. I'm here today as a Santa Barbara city resident and homeowner. I'm here to support the proposal that has been made to you by Casa Esperanza. I've heard people speak here today about the many problems of dealing with the wider homeless problem in the community. I do not believe that this 40-bed proposal is going to increase those problems. I think it will have the opposite effect. I hope you will support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ron Fox, followed by Oscar Seguero.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I come here today speaking as a layperson, as a board member of Casa Esperanza, and as a person who has worked for probably 30 years or so in what was termed here today the homeless enabling industry. As a layperson, I was the president of a large homeless organization down in Los Angeles, and I'm on the board of Casa here today. I would like to offer an invitation to all of you who sit on this panel today to come, not this year, but next year, because it was a little too late, to come and join what I would call a subcommittee to increase homelessness. That is the time next April when we are faced with the idea of reducing the bed count in the evening from 200 down to 100. And we are along with Imelda Losa, who is in charge of this, has to make the decisions as who can stay at Casa and who cannot stay at Casa. If that doesn't interest you, we also have some classes that we are putting on, especially for the females that are in residency with us, in rape prevention and in self-defense. This we have done because we have to ask some females to go out into the streets again after they have been with us for 3 or 4 months. This is absolutely a ludicrous position for us to be in. I hope you understand that something has to be done about this. We do not enable homelessness. That is not our business. We are trying to attack a problem of homelessness that is probably unsolvable. And for the gentleman who said that people like Mike Foley will lose their job if we secure, if we do a good enough job and we end homelessness, I will offer that gentleman a job in perpetuity to, if he would be willing to work in the homeless industry, because there are going to be homeless for the rest of my life, and I assume for the rest of your lives. I would suggest that you consider the request that we are making today for the 40 extra beds, and let us try and do the good job, the excellent job that we are doing with our transitional program in impossible circumstances and in a time in the economy when things are not going to be getting better but are going to be getting worse, and we will need as much help as we possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last speaker, Oscar Seguero. And if there's anyone else that wants to speak, please fill out a green slip and bring it up right now.
My name is Oscar Seguero. I've been a resident here of Santa Barbara for 26 years. Currently, the past 4 years, I've been self-employed, started my own business. I have a son that's 11 years old. I've been to the park, seen the homeless there, and my son used to ask questions, you know, like, hey, what's wrong with that person? I said, you know, they're having bad times. To get direct to the point, now I'm there at that point, and I'm using services like Casa Esperanza. And I feel I'm going to make services work for me. I can't speak for the people that do wrong, because that's on their, that's the person that does wrong. You know, the people that urinate in public don't have no respect for others, you know. But there are people that do have respect, even though they're poor. And I support the 40 extra beds. And I'm starting my own business. Been 4 years, and I'm still struggling to keep it going. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes all of the speakers that we had requested. Does staff have any remarks to wrap this up? And then we're going to take a short break.
Just to answer any questions from the commission once you get into the discussion. We're fine.
Anyone? Okay, we're going to adjourn for about 15-minute break and then resume at 2:55.
Mr. Chair, excuse me. I'd like to ask that Mr. Ramirez remain if he can. Oh, okay. Yeah. No, not that. No, that. The earlier one.
The world was new beneath the blue umbrella sky. Then softer than a piper man, one day it called to you. I lost you to the summer wind, the autumn wind, and the winter wind. They have come and gone, but still the days, those lonely days, go on and on. But guess who sighs his lullabies through nights that never end? My fickle friend, the summer wind. My fickle friend, the summer wind. Ooh, that summer wind. Warm, warm summer wind.
could supply my sky of blue. After you, who could I love? After you, why should I take the time to try? For who else could qualify after you? Who hold my hand and swear you'll never cease to care? For without you there, what would I do? I would search years, but who else could turn my tears into laughter after you? Hold my hand and swear you'll never cease to care. For without you there, what would I do? I would search years, but who else could turn my tears into laughter after you? After you. After you. There's been a change in the weather and a change in the sea. So from now on there'll be a change in me. My walk will be different, my talk and my name. Ain't nothing about me is gonna be the same. I'm gonna change my way of living, and if that's not enough, I'll even change the way I do my stuff, 'cause nobody wants you when you're old and gray. Yes, there'll be some changes made today. There'll be some changes made. For there's a change in the fashion. Ask the feminine folk. Guys like Mort and Lanny tell a new kind of joke. I must make some changes from the old to the new. I don't want to do things like I used to do. I'm gonna change my habits, and before the changing ends, I up changing all my old friends. I'll find myself some romance before I fade away. There'll be some changes made today, some changes made today.
I left my heart in San Francisco, high on a hill. It calls to me to be where little cable cars climb halfway to the stars. The morning fog may chill the air. I don't care, my love waits there in San Francisco, above the blue and windy sea. When I come home to you, San Francisco, your golden sun will shine for me. San Francisco, when I come home to you, my San Francisco, your golden sun will shine for me.
When I think of him, and I'll think of him all the time. Likely I'll spend my days hearing his turn of phrase, things I found hard to praise right now would seem sublime. The truth is, I'll only miss him when some stranger laughs, 'cause it's still his laugh. My heart hears. Maybe in time, I guess, the longing will grow the slightest bit less, and there will be moments, yes, when it disappears. I bet I forget him completely in about 100 years. The sky was blue and high above. The moon was new and so was love. This eager heart of mine was singing, oh, lover, where can you be? You came at last, love had its day. That day is past, you've gone away. This aching heart of mine is singing, oh, lover, come back to me. I remember every little thing you used to do. I'm so lonely. Every road I walk along with you. No wonder I am lonely. The sky is blue, the night is cold, the moon is new, but love is old. And while I'm waiting here, this heart of mine is singing, lover, come back to me. The sky was blue and high above. The moon was new and so was love. This eager heart of mine was singing, oh, lover, where can you be? You came at last, love had its day. That day is past, you've gone away. This aching heart of mine is singing, oh, lover, come back to me. I remember every little thing you used to do. I'm so lonely. Every road I walk along with you. No wonder I am lonely. The sky is blue, the night is cold, the moon is new, but love is old. And while I'm waiting here, this heart of mine is singing, lover, come back to me.
Day in, day out, the same old hoodoo follows me about. The same old pounding in my heart whenever I think of you. And baby, I think of you day in and day out. Day out, day in. I needn't tell you how my days begin. When I awaken with the tingle. One possibility in view, that possibility of maybe seeing you. Come kiss your lips, and the pounding becomes the ocean's roar, 1,000 drums. Can't you see that it's love? Can there be any doubt when there it is, day in, day out?
Look at me. I'm as helpless as a kitten up a tree, and I feel like I'm clinging to a cloud. I can't understand. I get misty just holding your hand. Walk my way, and 1,000 violins begin to play, or it might be the sound of your hello, that music I hear. I get misty the moment you're near. You can say that you're leading me on, but it's just what I want you to do. Don't you notice how hopeless I'm lost? That's why I'm following you. On my own, would I wander through this wonderland alone, never knowing my right foot from my left, my hat from my glove? I'm too misty and too much in love.
Could we reconvene the commission, please? Okay, the meeting will come back to order. I'd like to ask Mr. Vincent to clarify a point that's in the proposed conditions of approval, and then we'll hear from staff before we start our deliberation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did want to make a couple more comments regarding the recommendation and proposal from the police department. The recommendation is intended to create an added bit of flexibility within the conditional use permit. The police department, if the chief makes the factual findings and makes his determination that circumstances warrant an increase of 10%, would be able to refer individuals under that increase to the operator. That referral would not mandate the operator to accept any particular individual who's referred. It would not change the operator's operation. As has been described this afternoon, the operator currently, starting on April 1st and extending through the 100-bed period, which is part of the operator's proposal or the applicant's proposal, they transition from the first come, first served to the transitional model. The operator would not be required under the police department's proposal to alter their transitional model and accept anybody who the police department refers. That's not the intent. The intent of the police department's proposal is just to add one more opportunity for flexibility for the police department and the operator to work together to assist individuals in a crisis situation. How that plays out will be worked out with the police department and the operator. What I would recommend the Planning Commission today to consider is how would that added bit of flexibility affect the neighborhood, work with the change the impacts of the operation. If you have an example, the historical track record of this organization during its emergency shelter gives some example of how the number of beds operating affects the operation within the neighborhood. So that would be the 10% flexibility here would, for most of the year, be a matter of taking it from 100 beds to a maximum of 110 beds. How would that affect it? Is that degree of flexibility acceptable within the conditional use permit under the circumstances that would have to occur for the police department to make that determination, either a weather-related or if the public safety would dictate the need for those additional beds? Hopefully that clarifies a little bit about how that would operate. Admittedly, this concept and this opportunity to discuss the concept occurred quickly, and so the operator and the police department haven't had a chance to work all the details out, and I expect they will in the future. But I would also suggest that for today's purposes, not every detail is necessary in order to understand for your decision whether or not this that added degree of flexibility is acceptable for the conditional use permit.
Thank you, Mr. Vincent. Ms. Weiss, did the staff have any other clarifying comments before we start our discussion?
Yes, Chair Thompson. I requested that the applicant provide a very succinct description of the different programs that happen at the shelter. I think as a result of the public hearing, we heard comments about people's experience in the community and interactions with the homeless, including interaction here at in and around the Casa Esperanza, just to get better clarity on the number of programs that operate here at this one location. With your review of the conditional use permit, you can see that the Casa Esperanza is the emergency winter shelter. A reference was made to the armory that had been used in the past as the emergency winter shelter. That no longer exists. This is the location for the emergency winter shelter. This is the location where the community kitchen relocated from Haley Street and now serves the community out of this location. Mr. Foley also explained the 12-bed facility for the alcohol and drug detox program. So the program component that the applicant is requesting is the year-long current 100-bed program, which is tied to all the social services, and it is that program that they're requesting have the additional beds for this additional 90-day period. And again, the community and the staff and the Planning Commission, we all want to be clear that it is complex and there are many different populations with different issues and needs. And as the chair mentioned, just trying to get clarity on why is this such a focused and specific request. It appears, we're not really reviewing the entirety of the conditional use permit and all its operations. The applicant's request is fairly focused. So if you wanted them to explain that in any way further beyond what I'm saying, he's certainly prepared to do so, as well as, per your procedures, respond to comments from the hearing.
Thank you, Ms. Weiss. Mr. Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to get a little clarification from staff as to whether there are other like facilities on the South Coast.
Are you talking about more than just Santa Barbara or like facilities?
I'm talking about
in the
like
area?
Facilities between the county line on the east and the western extension of Goleta on the west.
Okay. Santa Barbara does house the rescue mission, and that is treatment facility. They also open up for emergency, not actually emergency beds, but the general homeless. I think they Do you have my list here? The list of, oh, we gave it. I had a list, but it's gone. They allow homeless persons to stay 10 days out of a month there, just general homeless without being in their treatment program. There's also the Salvation Army Hospitality House on Chapala Street, and they used to be open to homeless as a general population. About 10 years ago, they've changed, and they have what's called the Job Share Program, Job Club, and they are similar to Casa Esperanza's year-round shelter, whereas people who are staying there have to be employed and they have to save a certain amount of their money to be housed later on. As far as day centers, there's nothing else on the South Coast for people, services all in one area where homeless persons can go during the day and receive services. Community kitchen, I believe there might, and probably Mr. Foley can answer these better than I can, but there's some programs that feed people, but nothing as organized or as large. And some of them actually are feeding people in the parks, too. So,
thank you.
So that's it.
Mr. White?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going in just that direction of to continue on that. Then what we're hearing is that there are no overnight homeless facilities anywhere outside of the city of Santa Barbara. Is that correct?
I found my list, so that's good. I could tell you. Overnight outside of the city limits for homeless. There is, there's an emergency shelter for victims of domestic violence, but it wouldn't be this population.
Okay. And then there was mention of the Salvation Army facility in Carpinteria, which 90 beds thereabouts, which is a detox facility, which is in jeopardy at this point, or at least it's questionable. Are there other such facilities?
There's several small sober living homes around the city. They're kind of scattered around. There's the Hotel de Riviera, which is on Carrillo Street, right next to the fire station.
That's in the city.
Yes, that's in the city. Are you still talking out of the city?
Well, I think it's good to at least, yes. Let's talk outside the city.
I'm not aware of any. There very well could be, and probably the smaller recovery kind of houses there probably are out of the city, but not general homeless shelters.
And just to refresh my memory, the city of Santa Barbara has roughly 90,000 people, and on the South Coast there are roughly 200,000. So we're a little less than half the population. Okay, let me just see if there's something else before I'm done here. That's all, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, Ms. Weiss, from staff? Nothing else? Okay. I would say for the record that the Planning Commission received, I think my count was 18 letters regarding this topic as of about 11 o'clock this morning over the past week or so, split between those in favor and those against, and they are matter of the record. So, Planning Commission, open to your thoughts and deliberation. Commissioner Lodge.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry that Mr. Ramirez is no longer here, or that Mr. Dixon, who wrote, but who is the owner of Tri-County's Produce, isn't here, because my question to them is, does the problem get better or worse when the shelter closes down 100 beds on April 1st, and people who are who have been housed are now back out on the street? Does staff have any?
Chair Thompson, I don't know if Ms. Fitzgerald would like to come up, but she is a property owner and has residents on the property on Milpas. Do you want to come forward?
Commissioner Lodge,
I just noticed that there is another person here who represents the property and business owner in the area.
I'm sorry, I forgot about Ms. Fitzgerald.
Having had
Could you just identify yourself for the record
Barbara
again?
Fitzgerald, we own the property 201, 209, 11 South Milpas. It stays the same since the day to 1999. We've had problems, and they don't get any better; they get worse because of alcohol and drugs.
In answer to Commissioner Lodge's question, you don't see a difference between the time when the bed count goes down? Between the
No,
winter
because
and
there are a
summer?
lot of them go in and eat, and they don't stay there; they go out, so they
Okay, thank you.
into our property.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Fitzgerald. I guess I find it hard to, we're really talking about two different populations here of the homeless, and very loosely, they're those who are trying to get out of their situation and those who are not, those who are causing the problems. Well, it doesn't make sense to me that if you have, during the winter months, 200 people, homeless people off the street, and then you, April 1st, have to say to 100 of them, okay, you can't stay here anymore, that's going to help the problem on the street. You've got 100 more people on the street, most likely. And so here, letting another 40 people stay there, how is that going to make, I can't figure out how that is going to make the situation on the street for the property owners. And I know they have, I believe everything you say, and that I know you have serious problems with people, but the meal program continues. And so how keeping those 40 beds that they're requesting empty and putting those people out on the street, how that's going to help the situation out on the street, I don't see. And I'm prepared to support the request. I do think we need to look at what else might be done in terms of further police patrol, further, toilet facilities, porta potties around. Well, let me check with staff on that.
Could the audience please hold it down? This is for the commission to deliberate, and if we're going to have a lot of disruption, then I'm going to have to ask people to leave the room. Ms. Lodge?
Either staff or Mr. Foley, what is available in terms of things like toilet facilities in the area? And sir, I don't see anyone from the police department here, but I'd like to know what.
For
Mr. Foley?
For people
happening
who are
there?
members of Casa Esperanza who are not in a position where they've been asked to leave due to behavior problems, the bathroom facilities are, anyone can come and use them between 7 o'clock in the morning. I might be off by a half hour or so, from 7 o'clock in the morning and 4:30 to 7 o'clock at night. I understand that some of the public bathrooms are open. I know that the Cabrillo ball fields are open. And I only share with you that some people think that that's actually a problem. Some people think that it would be worse if they were closed. Some people think it would be better. That's just what I've heard.
Thank you.
And is there anyone here who can tell me about police activities in the area and if there's any special attention? Bob, will you leave if you can?
Okay. Would somebody from the staff please call the police department and ask Mr. Hanson to leave the room?
The police department comes to tell you that. They're selling drugs in the bathroom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Okay, the question was, does anybody on the staff have any feedback from the police department regarding the issues that have been raised regarding law enforcement in the area?
Chair Thompson, I had talked to Frank Mannix, actually he's Deputy Chief Mannix now, about coming, but he had a conflict. So I can't speak for the police, their deployment and what their plans are for this. But I can tell you in the strategies to address homelessness in the city of Santa Barbara that the council subcommittee formulated and council adopted, there are some recommended strategies that have to do with enforcement and some of them specific to that area. So if you'd like me to go over those, I could do that.
Would that be helpful for you?
Yes, I would like to know what
Okay,
is
go
the
ahead.
plan. Thank you.
Okay, one of them is adoption of a city ordinance that's more restrictive on solicitation, and that is envisioned to be on the State Street area, the Cabrillo, and Lower Milpas Street. And what we've heard from the city attorney is that it does not cover passive panhandling, meaning that someone, it's a civil right for a person to stand up and hold a sign, but it covers aggressive panhandling. And it has certain areas saying that it's illegal to solicit from an individual in a vehicle, within a city parking structure, within an outdoor dining area, within 25 feet of an ATM machine, in a line of 5 or more people, or while seated on a bench or chair on State Street, Milpas, and Cabrillo Boulevard. So that's one of the things that will be going to the ordinance committee, and then it will be going to council. There's another recommendation it's continuing to expand intergovernmental cooperation to curb negative behavior. One of those, I believe the police department has already begun, and that is they have what they call a frequent offender program, so that they have a list of people, and they found that the top 10 people on the list get a high number of tickets and for open container and loitering. And so what they're doing is with those people, wherever they are in the city, they are going to prosecute them as misdemeanors instead of infractions. And they've also done an area enforcement program. And same thing, it will be enforced as a misdemeanor instead of an infraction on different areas. And they include the 400 to 600 blocks of State Street, the main library, Cabrillo Ball Field, 300 North to 300 South Milpas, at Oak Park, and at Pershing Park. And then specific to the Milpas area, there's a recommendation to implement principles of a recovery zone to the extent that's legally possible. And those include working with the district attorney's office and county probation to request that Superior Court judges when imposing formal and informal probation conditions, issue and enforce a stay-away order. So if someone were convicted of a drug offense in that area, they could not enter that area again. That would be a violation of their probation or parole. The one exception to that is if the person says that they live there or they're going there for services, then the police can't enforce that on them. And then recognizing the need for limitations on alcohol sales, that they have asked that we work on developing a policy for conditional use permits for new ABC permittees within that area, the Milpas area, that limits the type of alcohol and the type of single-sale alcohol containers which may be sold. And the last one is have the police department take an aggressive stand on new liquor licenses and enforcement of ABC violations. So this report doesn't say, yeah, we promise to put more police officers on the street, and I believe that's more of a budgetary issue. But they are addressing the area as well as the entire city of Santa Barbara to help. The 12 strategies that were outlined in the plan, they fall under enforcement, intervention, and prevention. So it's kind of looking at it as a whole and not saying we're just going to enforce, but we're doing enforcement plus some alternatives. So I hope that answers your question.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much. I just have one suggestion that Calle Puerto Vallarta be included in the list of streets regarding the panhandling. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner White.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're being asked today to make the findings, which are, I think, very difficult to make, if not impossible to make today. And when you read the lines, the opening lines of the findings, that the use is deemed essential, desirable to the public convenience and welfare, etc. And another one is that the uses will not be materially detrimental to the public peace, health, safety, comfort, etc. So I feel like we're starting with this very uncomfortable premise that we have an area. I feel it happens that the Cabrillo Boulevard area is an area that I visit virtually daily, at least 5 days a week. So it's something that, whereas many things that we work on here are secondhand information or the gathering of data, this is my empirical, I get to see this area most days. And I feel as if we're killing the goose. I think that the folks at the hotel there, Four Seasons, the Doubletree, excuse me, I can see there's a real conflict that we have going there. There's a real conflict we have at the 3 bathrooms along there on the one on the north, the 2 on the north side of Cabrillo Boulevard and the 1 on the south. That each one of those is a center where you see people gathering, and I'm saying this because I have the burden of having supported all 3 of the facilities, Casa Esperanza for its various levels of increase, the Rescue Mission, and the Salvation Army reconstruction. So I obviously believe in the work and in the need. So I say this because I'm trying to look at this. I mean, I know that it's harming Tri-County produce. I know it's harming the residents to have that much homeless activity down there. And I see the success stories come, and some of you come and testify, and that's the great news as well. So I want to put out there the tension and the very painful conundrum that we face in trying to be wise decision makers, fair decision makers to the populace, to the people who live here, pay the taxes, and obviously to the folks that need help. Where we have, I think, dropped the ball, one of the places where we've dropped the ball, and that's why I was raising the questions about the Salvation Army, was we don't have participation, and we're less than half the population, and we are 100% of the overnight homeless facility resource. I know that it's economically you get more bang for the buck by having everything in one place, but you're getting more bang in the form of concentrations of homeless people. So I see as a regional need, it's almost like a RENA number or something, where I see a regional need for facilities to be distributed out amongst the communities for us to do, everybody to do their fair share. And so I don't know how that gets translated into policy over time, but it's something that I think would help. If everybody's pulling some load, it would make the load a little lighter for a place such as that Cacique Street and that area's burden that we're confronting. I hear the different populations that are being served, and that for what I'm experiencing, it's clearly daytime related. I'm not down there at night, and I'm hearing that there's that the meal situation is something that perhaps can be changed and can be distributed throughout the city more. It's not being distributed. I mean, how do you then get people? I don't see having a meal facility in Goleta. That obviously the geography starts to fall apart at a certain point. But something needs to get done about this great resource that we have, which is the Cabrillo Boulevard area. It's the community and every level from community, state, and federal have invested in that area over the last 80 years. it's one of our prizes, and it's not a safe area. It's an area where and we've heard testimony of people who don't bring their children there. I can see that people would be reluctant to use the bathrooms. So there's a failure that's occurred over this investment since 1999 in homeless facilities, and we need to recoup that somehow. I'm hoping that we can come up with some ways today to turn the corner on that. As a result, I think of Mr. Justice's work with us over the last couple of years on the Plan Santa Barbara with adaptive management. Is there a way to get accountability back around, and maybe it's to council rather than to here, or maybe it's to here, on a shorter term basis in 30 days? Do we have an improvement? Do we not have an improvement? In particular for me, not for me, in particular, the Cabrillo Boulevard area just feels like the biggest victim of this concentration of homeless resources. So I believe that the bed count is not necessarily the issue, that it's a bigger issue. We heard testimony from one of the owners that the problem's been increasing. Whether or not, whenever the bed count was, it didn't seem to make a difference. I think that there's been a positive change in other parts of town. I think I can say, well, it isn't such a great issue now in more of the upper portions of Santa Barbara, but that's not fair to the Cabrillo Boulevard area. So my gut feeling is to go with a very tight feedback system here, where, as I say, virtually on a 30-day basis to hear how these points are being made, this 12-point plan. I also would propose to expand it to all three of the bathroom areas need to be those misdemeanor zones. Absolutely. They're all, one of them, of course, is just right next to the little playground there, and that's just not appropriate. So you can hear that I would want something that's on literally a 30-day basis as we deal with this emergency, but I could reluctantly support the beds. And I wanted to put out there this. I've said in other hearings on this business about fair share throughout the region is something that I think is reasonable for the various jurisdictions to take as part of their load. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White. Mr. Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Mr. Foley has done an excellent job of I think, enhancing the already successful efforts of Casa Esperanza. The difficulty that we have here is one of whether we can permit additional intensification of uses. And I share many of Mr. White's concerns. Bottom line, I can't support this project. I can't support it because I don't think that the findings can be made. I don't think that this, albeit temporary, change in the CUP gets at the broader issues that the CUP is supposed to address. We have conditional use permits for uses which don't fit into any other zones, and they're approved based upon special conditions that are hand-tailored to mitigate or avoid the problems that a special use could create, and they're intended to be an insurance policy. And this is one problem where it is very difficult to resolve all the issues that swirl around this this particular issue, and it makes me scratch my head when I see a conditional use permit issued that then requires other neighborhood land uses to acquire their own conditional use permits to mitigate the problems that are created by the issuance of an individual conditional use permit. And that to me is somewhat of I understand the good intentions of everybody concerned here, but I think we really need to see the success of this 12-point plan before we make further changes. There has to be a compelling argument this is the right place to do what needs to be done. And equally important, there's this regional fair share issue. I think other agencies have got to step up to the plate. I know there are other agencies that are working hard, and the county has extremely well-trained individuals that are contributing to solutions throughout the South Coast and the county at large, but it's all about location, 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 and I can't see it to approve any intensification of use at this specific location for many of the reasons that Mr. White has stated.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph. Commissioner Jacobs.
Thank you, Chair Thompson. Mr. White and Mr. Jostes have very eloquently stated the technical basis for my opinions, my inability to make the findings, especially item B, that the uses will not be material detrimental to the public peace, health, safety, comfort, and general welfare, and will not materially affect property values in the particular neighborhood. It's impossible to make that finding. We've and aside from the general feeling for Mr. Foley's work and the great work that he's done with the homeless community and with getting people into housing and getting people into jobs, at the end of the day, there still needs to be a decision made about who can stay and who can go, and it really is regardless of what the CUP number is. That decision has to be made on a regular basis. The CUP number is related to the land use, and the land use, our purview, affects people. In this case, the land use has had an unintended consequence in terms of the damage that's been done to this neighborhood. And we have not really been able to hear a good synopsis of what actually is happening and why. We haven't really heard about what a long-range master plan from a land use perspective would be for the Casa Esperanza, which now I understand includes the community kitchen. Before they were separate nonprofits, now they're joined. And so Casa Esperanza now has the ability to make decisions about community kitchen that maybe they didn't before. But I would like to see, along the lines of what Mr. White was identifying, some kind of master plan or better study that talks about the land uses on this site, including how the community kitchen works, and analyzing and looking at how that affects the population and the neighborhood. Perhaps distributing meals in a different way through parks or through some other area that's not concentrated on Cacique Street. Perhaps that will actually improve the situation that the neighborhood is experiencing. But I have to listen to the people who live in the neighborhood, the folks who can't take their kids to the park, people who have businesses that are affected, property owners who have to wake up and clean up their property in the first part of their day. I have to listen to that neighborhood experience before I listen to some of the grander schemes of how, as a nation, we need to solve homelessness. This is a problem that is really taking a hard burden on this particular neighborhood. And the city tries to spread out programs throughout the city that might have negative influences. And in this case, the negative influences have been really concentrated in one neighborhood. They've done more than their share in terms of taking on this population. They've been amazingly patient, seeing a facility grow from 30 beds to 200. I'm really impressed by how patient the neighborhood has been. And I don't think that I can make the findings to increase the CUP number at this point. Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no one else, I will support the request.
Oh, go ahead.
Commissioner Lodge, did you want to say something else?
I'd rather hear what you have to say first.
Pardon?
I'd rather hear what you have to say first.
Okay, I will support the request. I agree with some of what I've heard from the public and from my fellow commissioners. There's a lot of angst in the community. It's obvious from the public testimony that we received about the overall homeless issue, but we aren't being asked to solve the overall homeless issue here. The issue is one of Casa Esperanza's programs, of which there are several, and not a long-term intensification of use. It's just an extension of an already existing use for another 3 months. Now, I will only support it if we have in the conditions that this issue be, at this time, that if we give it to Casa Esperanza, be used to come up with an analysis and work on a solution that is a lot longer term than just a 3-month extension. The 30 days that Commissioner White suggested is probably too tight to realistically be able to get much done and get much feedback, but I do not want to make it open-ended. In the findings, and we've heard a lot in the testimony about getting homeless people, quote, off the street. Well, it's not, the problem isn't when people are sleeping, the problem is when they're awake. And so focusing on how many people are sleeping at Casa Esperanza is missing the point. It's what people have been talking about is what do they do when they're awake and they would come out in the morning and so forth. So we do have a problem to solve, but we're not going to be, we aren't asked to, and there's no way we could solve it today, the overall citywide problem. There's no doubt that the problem has increased in the city over the past several years, and there's been a lot of smart people talking a lot about why and what we should do about it. But that's not what we're being asked to do today. We're being asked for 3 months to allow the existing use to continue, and I will support that if we have a potential way forward to be analyzed while we're in that 3-month period. Commissioner Lodge, did you want to speak some more?
Yes. I think what is, well, the population that will be there are people who are in programs. Is that correct, Mr. Foley? So it will not be a changing population. And that are actually staying there. That's everybody, all 140 beds. What seems to be the attraction, or what's bringing more people there, seems to be the meal program, which did used to be at Catholic Charities. And there were some other locations as well, as I recall, where meals were available. And maybe what needs to be looked at is trying to spread that out and trying to spread it out to get some other part of the South Coast to do their share. I agree that, as Mr. White said, we're less than half the population of the South. The city of Santa Barbara has less than half the population of the entire South Coast, and this is the only place with programs like this. But I would like to see the community that works with the homeless, see what else they can do. I imagine you have looked at this before, but I would like to ask that you look at it again and see how you can remove the attraction. And I know there's feeding now going on at Pershing Park as well, and that's another area where there are a lot of problems. And that has been increased from one day a week to 2 days a week, I believe. And just increasing the problems along Cabrillo Boulevard, which are real. So I think well, as I said, I'm willing to support today's request. I think the findings are for how denying the request and having 40 more people on the street, people who are in really shaky circumstances, is going to help the situation on Cabrillo Boulevard. I don't know, but I think we do need to work further on this issue and try to get other communities involved. I'd also be interested, I don't know if this information is readily available, I have a suspicion that Santa Barbara on a per capita basis does far more than any place else, and there was the mention of Los Angeles doing less than Santa Barbara is, and they've got a far greater population. So perhaps staff could round up some of that information. That would be useful. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I'd be open for a motion.
Chair Thompson?
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to get a little more definition, just in a discussion mode, perhaps, including with the applicant, the idea of a condition. Typically, where I think you're headed is some sort of time frame at which point the applicant and staff would come back with reporting to the commission that the study was undertaken, or these are the additional recommendations. The 12-point program that the council subcommittee recently adopted, my understanding is it's going to continue to have a life and move into additional study, working with the attorney and various implementation stages. So I don't know if you have more questions for the applicant or staff around how to frame a possible condition, if that's the majority of the commission's
I'll tell you my thoughts on it, Ms. Weiss. The 12-point program and a lot of the other discussion and programs that are going on don't relate specifically and solely to this 40-bed issue. We're being asked to expand one program at Casa Esperanza for a period of time. Is that something that's going to be a request in the future for next year and the years following? I would like to see something come back to us in a timely fashion that addresses that program. It may be part and parcel of the overall issue, the 12-point program, but that's not what we're being asked to address today. So that's my feeling on it. If we're going to be asked to extend the more intense use for another 3 months, I'd like to see have some feeling that some work is being done to look at the long-term need and what's going to be brought back to us in the future. If that's part of the 12-point program, it can be wrapped in, but that's not what we're addressing today. Mr. White?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I'm looking for, I appreciate that the 12-point program is going forward, and I see each element of it is going to have its different time frame. I think that the meals issue is one that is people are putting out there as a possible not fix, but at least mitigation of the prevalence of homeless people along sort of near the facilities. I also want to emphasize that, in my view, this is an emergency. It's an emergency of two kinds. I appreciate it's an emergency for the folks that without homes, and it's an emergency for the community, for the homeowners, for the people who are using the hotels, for the people of the city who want to use the parks and the bathrooms and the playgrounds. So I'm at least putting my own message out there that I think that the homeless advocate, I'll call it community, the good folks that make this stuff go, need to start looking at, for example, that Salvation Army facility. It must have permits up and running now, even though it's going bankrupt. There must be at least have the entitlements to continue. Step in and keep that going, because that would be something that is happening outside of this city, and that's at least it would be a gesture that something is going on that isn't just in our on Cabrillo Boulevard virtually. So that's the kind of thing I'm wanting to go both short and long. Mr. Thompson is emphasizing the long-term material, and I'm not committed to keeping this past the 90 days. And I do want, Mr. Chair, if it looks like we have 3 votes here, and for my vote, we need a 30-day report every 30 days. And I want to hear exactly how that meal program is going. And I think the community needs to hear that. And also what's going on Cabrillo Boulevard. And I think we should have a police representative here to describe it to us. This is an emergency. So that would be the basis that I could support going forward. And if you had some other suggestions about your long-term study activities, I'd appreciate hearing them.
Well, the long-term study that I was referring to is what does the facility want to do regarding these additional beds over the in the future years? Are we going to get another request every February or March to increase the 40 beds, and is it going to go up then to 60 bed increase and so forth? It should be if we're going to do a conditional use permit, it should be fully analyzed and it should be fully vetted before we get a request again like this. Mr. Jostes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would want to see how we can condition this project in front of us so that it is in harmony with the general plan land use designations for industrial and commercial. We've heard from folks that there are some concerns that this project raises for them, and I interpret that to be a land use incompatibility. And I think that's the core issue of this thing. I'm open to how we could restructure these conditions, but I just don't see the conditions as written as mitigating that concern and giving me the comfort level to make the 2 findings or the 1 finding, actually 2, comfort and general welfare, as well as the harmonious findings. So I'm not there yet.
Commissioner Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Like Mr. Jostes, when we hear this again, I will be looking for land use general plan specific kind of language. I want to know how this fits into our general plan and into the uses around it, rather than how it may or may not be serving its population. That's important too, but before the Planning Commission, I think we need to be looking at the land use compatibility very closely. And then Mr. Vincent asked if commissioners had opinions on the police chief section and the conditions of approval. And I do think that and at the very end of the day, it is a public safety issue, somewhat beyond Casa Esperanza's control in the broader neighborhood. And I do think that some flexibility for our public safety officers would be a very useful thing.
Okay. Any other comments from the commission or staff? Mr.
Chair,
White.
I'm wanting to know more. Ms. Jacobs, when you say public safety officer, how are you contemplating that? Is that applicable to today's decision making? Are you?
Well, as it's outlined, I'm sorry I don't have the page number. Mr. Vincent brought it up specifically, but that there would be flexibility for the chief of police to make a decision to
the 10%.
10% to increase bed capacity. I think that part of that part of the puzzle is a good one to start including, and hopefully as we get into a better planning process that will be enhanced somehow, but I would like to see it started sooner rather than later.
Mr. Chair, if I may give the Commission an example of how I see the Police Department's recommendation operating. I apologize, I have a cold. One of the circumstances, or one of the reasons why the applicant has made their request at this time, and also I think one of the reasons why the applicant's request is not as fully vetted as it might otherwise be, is that right now the community, the homeless community, has experienced dire circumstances. A couple of members of the homeless community were killed, murdered. If the police department has a similar circumstance occur at some time in the future, the chief of police could consider that and make the determination that public safety, the safety of the homeless individuals, needs greater flexibility under the bed limit. If that determination is made, if a police officer finds an individual who qualifies for the homeless shelter's operations at that time, so let's go to the transition stage where starting April 1st, it's not on the first come, first serve, but that person would have to be willing to qualify, to be part of the transitional stage of the operation. They would have to participate in one of the programs that the operator uses. So but that individual, if a police officer in a circumstance like we're experiencing right now finds such a qualified individual on the street and can refer them to the homeless shelter, the police department's proposal would give that flexibility for a limited period of time to get them out of harm's way for that particular night, up to 7 nights. So that's how I see the police department proposal. It's a fairly limited measure, but it's intended to address a dire circumstance. So that's hopefully that example can give the commission a little bit more understanding about this. Again, we're kind of working on the fly here to address the particular circumstances that we're experiencing right now, but that's a way I see that the police department proposal playing out.
And just a point of clarification, that particular part of the proposal and the conditions was not originated with Casa Esperanza. That was originated with the police department. Okay, Commissioner Lodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. White, you're asking for a report back in 30 days. What will that report consist of? And what do you expect to see in that report?
I would hope to see a meal program that has started somewhere else. I would hope to see improved enforcement along Cabrillo Boulevard as 2 elements. I mean, I would be wanting to hear that that steps have been taken already to improve those situations, that situation.
Okay, so you're not asking that they go out and do a count of how many homeless there are now and come back and
I think it's got to be supply side driven at this point. Again, this is something where we're not going to see what we want to see is the providers moving, as I say, in an emergency mode. I'm very concerned about this, and that's how I can. I'm having a very hard time. Just as Mr. Justice and Ms. Jacobs talk about, we've got to make findings that just are. It's virtually. This is not a healthy situation. It's not a value maintaining property value maintaining situation. So I'm struggling with those findings, and I'm looking for ways to do the adaptive management that Mr. Joseph talked about. I mean, to be ultimately hardcore, we could say, well, we could shut it down in 30 days if they're not performing in 30 days. The time frame is so short that I don't want to go there. I just feel like, okay, if it's 90 days is what we're doing, then in 90 days we can. I don't intend to extend this any further. And I don't intend on extending it. What I'm hoping happens out of this is that other programs happen somewhere else to start the ball rolling in another part of this community. That's what I hope happens in a long-term fashion.
I would just point out to Mr. White and Commissioner Lodge that anything along Cabrillo Boulevard is totally out of Casa Esperanza's hands. That falls into the city administration and police department's hands.
It does.
So
it does. Obviously,
we're
the Casa.
casting a wide net here, and
That's right.
And that's not what we were set to do here. We can't solve the total citywide problem. So I just want to bring us back to focus on the.
I acknowledge, what you say. Mr. Vincent brought up the point about the police discretionary activity. Well, that's a city element. The city is a real stakeholder in Casa Esperanza. So while it doesn't run it completely, it's a player. So these are integrated elements, and I think the city needs to step up as well to improve the situation, to participate in improving the situation.
Okay.
Chair Thompson, I just want to point out the existing conditions of approval. We have an attachment, Exhibit A, and I know that when the Casa Esperanza is before the Commission in its annual reports, a fairly thorough review of the status on all the conditions is made to you, and that one meeting such as that happened last year. Perhaps just a quick review of those conditions, you can find whether or not that is perhaps what Commissioner White would like to also have is, have a report back from the Casa Esperanza, because there are existing conditions of approval as well. There's a number about outreach, working with the community, watch and patrol, property maintenance, all of those things that I know have been an ongoing part of the program. They weren't prepared or asked to bring any of that to you today, but again, with regard to what Casa Esperanza has agreed to and has within their purview, I think that makes a lot of sense. And since the community kitchen is part of their program and it's part of this approved conditional use permit, asking for a report on the community kitchen and, form a committee to explore and work with other community groups to look for other locations related to the community kitchen. Things like that make sense to me. I'm just a little concerned about the Commission getting into issues of police enforcement, as you mentioned, on Cabrillo Boulevard and issues such as that. So I just wanted to point in the direction of the type of conditions that we already have this property owner responsible for might be more appropriate to amend or expand.
Thank you, Mr. White.
Chair, I am reaching to find a way to say yes to this. So I'm struggling with it. And so, one of my other choices is to not say yes to this. So that's, if I can't get what I need out of it to say yes, then I need to change my vote.
No, I understand. I'm trying to support that by saying the community kitchen is part of the land use approved here, and I think we could add control and direction on exploring how that's working. Again, I think the community kitchen is, it's established, it's approved with this conditional use permit. As long as they meet the conditions of the conditional use permit, presumably they can continue that permitted use. But I think the concerns that we've heard from the neighborhood, we've heard similar concerns every time the projects come forward, and these are the conditions that we've worked up to date to try to improve land use compatibility and neighborhood effect, minimize the negative neighborhood effects. And so I'm just suggesting that my review of these conditions is that we could ask for within, I don't know, I think I would recommend that it be within the 90-day period. I don't know what they could come back, get on your agenda in 30 days. There wouldn't be any staff analysis or input into their report, but perhaps within 90 days that they return with recent activities supporting the conditions for neighborhood communication, neighborhood outreach, neighborhood watch and patrol and property maintenance, and a new condition regarding the community kitchen. I think that's certainly within appropriate or reasonable discretion in an amendment to the conditional use permit.
All right, well, and maybe we could split the difference and go with a report midway at 45
60 days or 40 days. Or,
yeah,
okay.
40 and halfway through. It's for me. It's the frog in the pot syndrome, where this has been just getting warmer and warmer and warmer, and now the water is starting to boil, and things are not. They're not. It isn't a successful mitigation at this point. So we need to do something to improve the situation. That's I expect why this is going to be a split vote, and why it's as difficult of an issue as it is. So I'm willing to do the 45 days, and I think your structuring of it is adding in the kitchen element as one Hail Mary pass as part of this package. I'm willing to go to even make that motion, Mr. Chairman, when that time, if that time is now to do.
Thank you, Mr. White. Commissioner Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I won't be supporting the motion for the reasons I already outlined, but I hope that when it comes back, there will be a better sense of the Milpas Action Task Force, their participation, and also a representative from the police department.
Commissioner Lodge.
Do I understand this correctly, staff, that the only thing that's different from the existing CUP is what's underlined? The change in the date and the addition of Section F increases to meet critical need. Those are the only changes. So, yes. It's not as if you're being asked to vote on something new. This is what exists, other than the change of the date for the additional 40 beds and the increases to meet critical need, the 10% request. So
and adding the kitchen, the report.
That's what you would like to add, and I'll support that if you want to make that part of the motion. But I just want to point out that what we're voting on is what you already approved, except for those two things.
Changes to the conditional use permit that are underlined in your staff report copy. Right.
Correct.
Okay. Any other comments? Mr. Justice.
I would just ask, Mr. Chair, I just asked Mr. White whether his condition is oriented towards addressing the direct impacts of the facility, or the indirect impacts as well, or what's the underlying intent of the amendment to the conditions?
The underlying intent is to lower the adverse impacts of the homeless population on the Milpas Cabrillo neighborhood. And it's, in my mind, it's a cumulative concern, and I'm at the same time, I'm also, just these conversations that are coming out, I think are putting out there the hard news of the need for facilities to be, the resources to be provided throughout the region, and that day has now come where that need needs to be start to be fulfilled. So this is a combination of a head and heart motion. Is how I see it.
Okay. Before you make that motion, I'll allow Mr. Foley to respond to the comments.
I actually just wanted a bit of clarification. We will report to you on anything that you would like. We have initiated a study to take a look at the difference between the day center and the center. We're going to make as quick a progress as we can on that. But in the 18 comments that you received, and I feel the pressure to perform and do a good job and deal with the homeless issue everywhere, but of the responses that you received that were negative, 3 of them were from our neighborhood, from this neighborhood. Many of them were from West Beach. I have worked for 4 years as hard as I possibly can to do everything I possibly can with our neighbors. And I point out that, 400 or 500 protest opportunities for people to come and talk to you came, and very, very few did. So I want to let you know we feel the problem, and we will continue to do what we can. We've suggested 3 years ago a complete revamping of, for instance, the Cabrillo ball fields, of turning it into a real ball field and perhaps creating a park setting by Rainbow. We have advocated for more drug enforcement, more alcohol. I mean, everything you see in that plan. The recovery zone, you remember I came and talked to you about that. That's in the plan. I can't tell you how much work we've done to try to provide leadership. We will report on anything, but I'm having a hard time. I want just for clarification, when we make the report, am I reporting on this, or am I being asked to report on something that is like West Beach, which is way beyond what I will do what you want, but I just need clarification on what's our responsibility to you, because the Milpas Action Task Force is Milpas, so we've been focusing on that. Are you asking us to do more? If you are, we want to, but yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Foley. I think Mr. Foley's point is the point that I made before, and that is that there's no doubt the city has a citywide problem, but that's not what we're being asked to address today in this change to the conditional use permit. Commissioner Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think one thing you outlined already was the Fielding Institute study. Is that going to happen soon, or?
I assume, hold it up, please. I assume you're addressing staff, Commissioner Jacobs.
Staff would be making this part of the conditions. I'm presuming that the Fielding study would be part of what we would be expecting to hear in 45 days? Or yes, no?
We're just learning about the study they mentioned. They got some tentative agreement just 2 days ago.
Okay.
But wherever, since that's part of the record now and an expectation that hopefully that will bring forward good information wherever they are in 45 days. If the requirement is to return in 45 days, then we'll find out whatever we can about that study. I don't think we can require that the study be completed in 45 days. That's not...
Well, Mr. Foley asked what he's being requested to provide, and
so what I was envisioning
that he offered, and I'm wondering if that's part of what he's including.
Yes.
And that will include some very important information, because although the problem, often in land use decisions, we look at a neighborhood thing versus a regional thing. And how much of this is a neighborhood thing for just the folks who are living or residing in Casa Esperanza versus a more regional issue with the community kitchen, where people are coming presumably from a broader area to partake of that service. And so I think that's an important part of what would be coming back to the Commission.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner White.
Mr. Foley did make a commitment to the Fielding study. What is that commitment? Can you step up to the mic and tell us what
Mr.
what
Foley,
you'll have
could
done
you
by
come up
when?
and address that point?
Like I said, we're moving very quickly on it. We've got a commitment from the police to participate. We've got a commitment from a specific Fielding Graduate Institute person to do it. And we're just a matter of sitting down and developing protocols. I can report to you in 45 days the progress that we've made, and I can promise you that I will make as quick a possible progress as I can.
And at that time, you would be able to tell us, have a commitment on when that study would be complete.
If it's not complete by then, I will definitely have a commitment on when it will be complete.
Right.
Mr. Chair, can we ask Mr. Foley to describe if you were to give the title of that study? Is it a study of the day program, as Commissioner Jacobs understood as well? What are we studying?
Mr. Foley.
Yeah, it's a comparison of police contact with Casa Esperanza members who are in the evening sleeping program versus the day center people who do not sleep there.
Any other discussion? All right, open for a motion.
Well, Mr. Chair, I would move that the Planning Commission approve the changes to the conditional use permit for the Casa Esperanza, including the increase in the number of beds for 90 days, as outlined in the staff report, and the increase to meet critical need, and with a report back to the Planning Commission in 45 days, including a progress report on creating an alternative meal location. And also with an update on the Fielding study.
I'll second the motion.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see staff would like to make a clarification, I assume.
The condition is within 45 days, status report and progress on the Fielding Institute study, which looked at the police contacts with regard to the different programs, day and meal and nighttime. So we can describe that accurately. Also, a report on exploration with other agencies in the community regarding additional food service throughout the region, or something like that. Is that what you're saying?
Progress report on locating lunch facilities, if not actually having set something up, locating lunch facilities somewhere else at alternative locations.
Okay.
In other words, it's in conditions of approval 1A, 5A that needs to be evaluated in this study.
Okay, and then the last point was just whether or not I heard Commissioner Jacobs mention, and I was pointing out too, the conditions A, 9, 10, 11, and 12 are the conditions that require regular coordination with the Milpas Action Task Force, neighborhood, directly affected neighbors for maintenance, and that typically you get a report on those activities, and what is the report recently that they can also present in 45 days. That would be my suggestion, just to expand the condition for reporting on 9, 10, 11, and 12 as well.
Okay. Thank you. That's a good addition.
Okay.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
No.
No.
Motion passes 3-2. Thank you. Okay, moving on to our administrative agenda, committee and liaison reports. Do we have any? I will pass along a liaison report. The airport noise committee met, and the noise complaints, which they track on a ongoing long-term basis, are continuing a downward trend, which from a land use point of view is a good trend, because that means that either the users are using quieter airplanes, or some of our traffic pattern procedures are working. Anyway, the downward trend is continuing. Any other committee and liaison reports? Mr. White.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of comments on the minutes of the Board of Harbor Commissioners. There's a, as with every other budget in the city, the waterfront budget is taking a serious hit, and they're going to be raising fees and reducing work programs and capital programs next year in order to scratch toward a balanced budget. However, in the midst of that, I was impressed to see a wonderful list of green programs, the Clean Marina program, which includes disposing of everything from boat sewage to toxic chemicals, and dredging up material off the bottom of the harbor on an annual basis. They've just made a real effort over the last, incrementally over the years to make the harbor a cleaner place to be, and make people more conscious of the water environment in which they're acting down there. So it's making the best of a dwindling reserve situation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Last item is the review of the decisions of the staff hearing officer. There was, in addition to the one that Ms. Weiss mentioned yesterday, there were, about 3 items on the agenda. Does anybody have any comment or want to call any of these up?
Ms. Reardon asked me to make a couple of comments, or not asked me, but at least updated me in the absence of Ms. Larson. There's one item in particular that 2105 Anacapa Street, it's one of those situations where the mod being requested is changing out doors and windows or adding doors and windows to an existing wall, but that wall is being added a significant house, and the house is struggling its way through the Single Family Design Review Board, and not in harmonious form yet, and so yet the mod was granted. So Ms. Reardon was thinking that may be appealed. It's definitely a controversial. It has at least a neighbor that is concerned about the project. So
what we have is a wall that has to have 3 more walls and a roof before it's a full project.
That's right, and those are still in doubt.
Okay. Were there any other items of note?
The others didn't seem to be. There were a couple of items, and they were not attracting controversy and were reasonable and were approved.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thank you all. We're adjourned.